Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Monday, January 11th, 2021. My name is Sam Seder. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, executive editor of The American Prospect, David Dayen, will be here to discuss the politics of holding the Republicans to account and the politics of moving forward. Meanwhile, Nancy Pelosi says the clock is ticking on the 25th Amendment as Democrats begin to gear up for impeachment. And there's a big CYA project going on in D.C. right now as the ex-Capitol Police chief claims House and Senate Sergeant-at-Arms quashed the National Guard requests. Meanwhile, Biden chooses a career diplomat, Bill Burns, to head the CIA. Twitter bans Trump for good. And it may have switched over to Parler. Parler loses its distribution and its functionality. And this is encouraging. Joe Biden has rejected austerity, ready to spend trillions with a T. Biden also announces vaccine distribution will get much more aggressive. That means no holding back on doses that are available just to make sure that people get two first. Trump administration allows Tennessee to switch to Medicaid block grants, virtually guaranteeing Medicaid cuts. And Mike Pompeo, still busy, to announce Cuba will be designated a terrorist state, because why not? All this and more on today's program. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us. Emma Vigeland is, of course, here with me in studio today, as always. Hello, Emma.
Hello, Sam. How are you?
I am well. And Emma, I am sure you know that I was being a little bit facetious as when I said, why not, in terms of designating Cuba a terrorist state. It was only 4 or 5 short years ago where we were beginning to normalize our relations with Cuba. And I imagine soon we will return to that place. But, this is Mike Pompeo trying to shore up a base in Florida, perhaps maybe for his own run in 2024. So much of what we're seeing now is about Republicans, at least in terms of what Republicans are doing right now, whether it was last week or this week, it's about setting themselves up for a 2024 run. And much of what we're hearing from the rest of normal society is to hold them to account for what took place this past week, which would, in many respects, inhibit their run. We're going to talk to David Dayen about that. And we've got a lot to get to today because there's
so much news.
So much news. And
we didn't even fully digest Georgia when we had to jump into the assault on the Capitol. And then, of course, COVID rages throughout the country, 4,000 deaths a day, multiple times, I believe. It does not get more packed than this.
I don't know if we've actually even mentioned the or maybe we did in passing, Merrick Garland being appointed, or I should say nominated to be Attorney General, Marty Walsh nominated to be Labor Secretary. He's the mayor of Boston, a former union guy himself, which is encouraging. Of course, what happened in Georgia means that we don't have to be so tentative in talking about these nominees. It is a Democratic Senate for all intents and purposes. And there's every reason to believe that all of them, if not most of them, will be confirmed by this Senate. We will talk more about that there'll be one of the topics that we talk about with David Dayen. David Dayen, I don't know how he does it. He's like some type of animatron, but
yes, a robot of sorts.
He writes on a whole host of things and is incredibly knowledgeable about all of them. Let's turn for a moment to, and we are still very much in the wake. And this weekend has been, it seems to me, this past weekend, getting a further understanding of what took place on Wednesday. It was not just the shock. It was, there was not a lot of coverage of this event in the way that you would imagine in terms of like being in the building. It turns out ITVS had a lot or seemed to have the most footage. It's a British outfit. I don't know. Maybe they're just more used to the concept of covering when parliamentary buildings are being stormed.
Well, they would know because the British were the last to storm our Capitol building in the War of 1812.
I have imagined most of these people were probably not alive for that, but yes.
You don't know that.
I don't know that for sure. I cannot confirm that at this time. But what has happened over the past couple of days was a growing awareness of how many organizations funded this and why things went wrong in terms of it, and this is still being sorted out. Many of the sort of like more prominent figures who are in the Capitol have been apprehended by law enforcement. The ones with the zip ties, the cuffs, and obviously
they were there to take hostages, folks. That's just.
I mean, that's the only reason why you would do that. The bombs, the potential weapons, and more information about how people died. Capitol police officer was essentially beat up and trampled. There was another woman who died who was trampled. One of the protesters.
Another officer died by suicide over the weekend too, who was involved.
Unclear how directly
if it's
that
connected, but the police union is claiming a connection.
We had somebody die trying to scale the wall of the Capitol. Many people successfully scaled it. So we're catching up with that. Here is here's Ben Collins from NBC News, showing a right-wing reporter explaining what it was that the Q believers, right? I mean, because I don't know how many of these people were Q or just Trump supporters or what. I don't know if there's even a delineation at this point, but or just right-wing, general right-wing extremists, white supremacists. Play this clip.
I think an important thing to understand here is that there were two different kinds of people at this rally. There were Proud Boys, militiamen, Oath Keepers who stormed to the front with the idea that they would, wreak havoc, cause violence, maybe arrest, maybe kill some lawmakers. That was the point for those people. Other people, if you're in the QAnon world, in that universe, you thought you were going into the Capitol and you were storming it for Donald Trump. You thought you were receiving orders from him once you got inside the Capitol. And that's what was happening with a lot of those QAnon people. They were in there waiting for more orders. The guy with the zip ties, there were posts for weeks beforehand in the QAnon world about arresting these lawmakers and then bringing them to justice on behalf of Donald Trump. And they explicitly talked about zip ties. They were makeshift handcuffs for the lawmakers if they got to the right part of the Capitol. I don't think people understand how close we were here. This was close to a mass casualty event involving members of Congress. And it's incredibly dangerous. That's what people are talking about. In QAnon, there's this thing called the Great Awakening. And in the Great Awakening, all of the lawmakers are arrested, rounded up, and executed in a public forum. And that's what this was to a lot of these people. They thought that this was about to happen.
That's really disturbing to hear.
Incredibly disturbing. And the other, when you hear that about the idea that these Q people were looking for, that the idea was like, get the point, get to meeting point A, and then we're going to give you further instructions. And of course, Collins is describing a second sort of tranche of white supremacists, white nationalist types who were ready to just wreak havoc, maybe, sort of under the cover of what the Q people doing. I mean, it's hard to know how delineated even they perceive themselves. But when you see this tweet from Boebert, yes, she is a freshman congresswoman, Lauren Boebert. I can't remember quite where she's from. I think she's from Colorado, if I remember correctly.
I believe so, yes.
And she put out a video. I don't know if you remember this from like a week or two ago, like an ad for herself, bragging about how she was bringing her Glock around Washington, D.C., because she's packing heat and that's her right. And she's afraid of what's going on, which, deserves some reinterpretation after all this. Put up this. She is live tweeting when she's inside. We're locked in the House chambers. Okay. And then she says the speaker's been removed from the chambers.
Why would she want to publicly say where Nancy Pelosi's whereabouts are, huh?
I mean, I
That's a legitimate question.
It's a legitimate
and
question.
A terrifying one.
And it's all I can't tell if she was sending out like, we're locked in the chambers and we're safe, so nobody worry about us. Or if it's saying like, this is where we are, come get us.
Within the context of who she is, it's not a crazy thought, the one that we are having. I mean, I think it's one of the more logical ones.
I mean,
especially when you see how close it got. I mean, the Igor Bobich of, I'm sorry if I butchered his name, of Huffington Post tweeted out a timeline of how close it was in the Senate. I mean, they were within minutes, 2 or 3 minutes after the evacuation of these lawmakers, and they had zip ties. And again, Nancy Pelosi's one thing, but we're always talking about the ire and the vitriol and the racism that's thrown at people like Ilhan Omar and Ocasio-Cortez. Can you imagine if they got their hands on them? It was incredibly close. And the worst part is that the id of this, the fury, is fueled by the colleagues of the very people that these insurrectionists were trying to kidnap and potentially murder.
Yep. I mean, this is, that's the thing, is that like there's a lot of debate about, how serious was this insofar as like, is it possible to overstate how dangerous? And I think like we just don't know. And the fact that, to the extent that we know at this point, there was no, military involvement, although, I guess that's true in the strictest sense. We don't know. Like we really don't have a full sense of what was coordinated by whom and what. I'm not suggesting that there was any major military participation, but I'm saying like, we have a lot of vets there. We don't know like why, if it is the case that the Sergeant of Arms, both the House and the Senate, were worried about optics. The National Guard may have been worried about moving in. We don't know why they would be worried about that, as opposed to, let's say, the BLM protests, or why they would be worried about. I mean,
they were not concerned about optics there.
Or maybe they were. It's just that there were optics that they appreciaed more.
It was the inverse. Yeah.
The point is, this needs to be investigated. It needs to be investigated thoroughly. It needs to be investigated publicly. We need to have a better sense of who was involved in this. And I want to know why there was a congresswoman who was basically telling her Twitter followers where Nancy Pelosi was and where she was not at any given point as there's an assault on the Capitol building. It just seems really scary. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to be talking to David Dayen about all of what we're hearing in terms of the politics about holding Republicans to account. And then also the flip side of this, what we know from where the Biden administration is in the wake of Georgia and these appointments. And big announcement from Joe Biden last week, very important one, that he intends not to be beholden to the rhetoric of austerity and or the policies of austerity at this time. Now is the time to go big. And we'll talk to David Dayen to get a sense of just how big Joe Biden's going to go. Be right back in a moment. In the meantime, New Year's.
What about it?
Well, you make some New Year's resolutions.
You know, I've been trying to abide by some of my New Year's resolutions.
Yeah, I didn't go very far. Emma was like all bragging last week about dry January. You made it 10 days. Did you even make it 10 days?
It was like 8 days.
Yeah.
Okay, but I had a celebration, a birthday. A virtual, a birthday of someone important in my life. So I use that as an excuse, I'll be honest with you. But I'm still exercising in the morning, some mornings.
Well, I tried. I don't know if I'm doing that well. You know, one of the things is like, I felt like for the first time in my life, well, maybe not the first time. Yeah, probably prior to the this whole COVID mess, that I was like getting my my appearance game up a little bit better. Like I was shaving more often and dressing a little better.
Yeah, you look.
I slacked off a little bit during COVID. I'm not gonna lie, a little bit, but I'm back on it. And one of the ways that I am back on it is I am now like spending a lot of time on Stitch Fix, looking at different outfits that I'm going to get when I get vaccinated. Forget it. Like that's it.
Yeah.
I don't want to get people too invested in how my style is going to upgrade. But
are you going to wear like a flat brim hat?
No, I'm not going that far. No. But the thing about Stitch Fix that makes it easier for me is it offers clothing that is hand selected by stylists for your size, for your style, and for your budget. And it is the easy solution to make you, look and feel your best. So what happens is they'll send you, they will pick stuff in your box. If there's stuff that you particularly don't like, you can tell them not to send it back to it. They send it back. They send it to you. You try on stuff out of your box, what you want to keep, what you want to buy, what you want to save back. Sending it back is super easy, completely free. Exchanging stuff is super easy. Shipping is free. Like I say, there's a prepaid, SAISY or a return envelope in it. And what happens is you pay $20 for a styling fee for each box, and then it gets applied to whatever you keep. So Stitch Fix has styles for and clothing for women, for kids, for men. Obviously, they ship all over the U.S. and they do it in the UK too. In the past, I've talked about my Chukka boots. I now pronounce them correctly.
I've heard really great things. I haven't tried it myself, but a lot of guys in my life have tried Stitch Fix, and it's helpful for men who often don't know how to style themselves. I'll be honest. Yeah,
there's my hand. I have adopted the five pocket pants, flag and anthem pants. And, I was on the fence about my thermal crew. I think it was from, I can't remember what the name of this. I should probably know this, but that's part of the problem. I don't know it stuff, but it's like a white thermal crew. I was like, I'm never going to wear that. And now I wear it like it's almost inappropriate how often I wear it. My daughter stole my my flannel. And then I had a mock turtleneck sweater and I didn't like it. And I sent it back because I don't do mock turtlenecks, but that was what was great about it. You can get started today at stitchfix.com/majority. You get 25% off when you keep everything in your fix. That's stitchfix.com/majority for 25% off when you keep everything in your fix. Stitchfix.com/majority. Check it out. And while we're talking about New Year's resolutions, this is going to be tough for me because I've actually because I'm not going on MSNBC as much because I can't get a babysitter when I'm with the kids, and then it's about scheduling, and then distance and But so I'm not quite shaving as much as I used to. But as you can see, at the beginning of the weekend, I did shave.
Good job.
Yes, and it's of course it's grown back. But I did make a resolution where I was like, you know what? I am no longer going to keep my toiletries because I have to move around a little bit between COVID, kids, and whatnot. No longer going to keep my toiletries in a plastic bag. I'm going to actually get
like a DOP, or as you call it,
a DOB kit, right?
A DOP.
Isn't that what most people call it?
DOP. I thought it was DOPP.
All right. Well, people call it a DOB. I don't know. I called it.
No, it's
a toiletry bag or whatever you call it.
Yeah.
And I got it on Harry's. I was wondering, like, they must have it, and they do.
Nice.
So I got a nice little toiletry bag coming to me. Harry's has combined a simple ergonomic design with their razors. 5 blades, obviously. They get their steel from Sweden. They manufacture their blades in a world-class factory in Germany. They cut out the middleman, so it's significantly less expensive. Start the new year with some savings. New customers can redeem a Harry's trial set for just $3 when you go to harrys.com/majority. Plus, Harry stands behind the quality of their blades so much they have a 100% money-back guarantee on harrys.com. So I'm getting that DOB kit, but you can pick up one of their razors. They got all sorts of they've got more and more accessories these days. I've noticed. I went over there. Sometimes I use that shower gel that they got. But Harry's has a special offer for listeners of my show. Now, new customers can get a Harry's starter set for just $3 at harrys.com/majority. You get the 5-blade razor, you get the weighted handle, foaming shaving gel with aloe, and a travel cover, all for just $3. How can you go wrong with that? Are you kidding me?
You can't.
Get everything you need for a close, comfortable shave. Go to harrys.com/majority to claim your offer. And lastly, big time in use around here in the office back in the day when we were all in the office, but it is part of my morning ritual now with the matcha energy liquid IV. But occasionally, I will overindulge in the alcohol. I'll need I'm a little dehydrated the next morning. Boom. Liquid
Sam's going to
IVs.
give me some of these
Yes.
for my no longer
Exactly.
dry January.
Liquid IV's energy multiplier is an absolute game changer. It gives you a little extra boost we all need. One stick of this matcha, the energy multiplier, is like drinking 2 cups of coffee. And it's all natural alternative to processed energy drinks for a sustained energy boost throughout the day. The premium matcha and green energy blend tastes delicious. You've seen me, particularly when I'm, out of studio. I got a big bottle of it like this, and I drink quite a bit of it. Liquid IV's cellular transport technology delivers the optimal ratio of nutrients for more efficient uptake, enhanced rapid absorption into the bloodstream, gives you lasting energy boost fast. It's important to stay hydrated as well. It's non-GMO, vegan, free of gluten, dairy, and soy. And in response to COVID-19, products are being donated to hospitals, first responders, food banks, veterans, active military. It's basically how I start my morning. And with the energy multiplier, and like I say, occasionally I'll hit up the standard to get a little bit more hydration. You can grab your energy liquid IV in bulk nationwide at Costco, or you can get 25% off when you go to liquidiv.com. Use the code MajorityRep, not Majority Report, MajorityRep at checkout. That's 25% off anything when you order and use promo code MajorityRep at liquidiv.com. And start fueling your adventures today at liquidiv.com, promo code MajorityRep. All right, so let's welcome David Dayen back onto the program. David Dayen, of course, is the executive editor of The American Prospect and the writer, the executive producer of Unsanitized. But that's going away, apparently, and we're going to have to talk about that, David, because that actually dovetails with everything else that we're going to talk about. But we will get to why one of my first reads as soon as it comes out. I'm actually there before it comes out, and I was going to talk to you about maybe rolling that thing out just a little bit earlier for me every day, but we can talk about that too. David Dayen, welcome to the program.
Hi, Sam. Good to be on Peacock.
Thank you. I should remind you, Emma Vigeland is here, and I should also remind you that we, if you miss any part of the show, you can see it replay on Peacock app, the Choice channel, 5 p.m., 10 p.m., or on demand at any time. So there you go. All right.
I watched it just recently on my smart TV.
Oh, did you? Did you get it?
Yes.
All right. Well, good. I'm glad. There's. We'll put that in our column.
Tens of viewers.
Well, maybe, and we got to start everywhere, right? I mean, I think there's literally 20 million viewers on Peacock app now.
Excellent.
I don't know watching this show, but we'll see. All right. Well, all right. I want to start with what's happening in terms of impeachment. You had a very important piece the other day, what it means to never forget. And that was, I guess that was just really a day after the event took place, or that night. Where are you? Well, where are you / where is the Democratic caucus? Because this feels like another instance where the forces overtook the unwillingness of Nancy Pelosi, particularly the House leadership, in wanting to tap on the brakes on this. And I think there's still some tapping on the brakes, but she initially was like, no time for impeachment. You start to hear people say, we can't look backwards. We got to go forwards. And it just seemed like the facts on the ground and pushes from different speakers ended up overcoming that.
Yeah. I mean, sorry for the phone. I think that she, listened to her caucus, and we're going to have an impeachment vote. We're not going to have it until Wednesday or Thursday. And if you hadn't noticed, the time is running out on the actual term of office of the president. But there's more than a little symbolism in, forcing this to be the only president in history to be impeached twice. And there's an importance to mustering up some form of accountability for this circumstance, for incitement to insurrection, as the article of impeachment discusses. The only way that this is an ending and not a beginning is if you, instead of looking downwards and arresting the random people responsible for the Capitol riot, you look up the ladder at the forces that enabled it to happen. And that's not just Trump, that's the Republican Party, that's its funders, that's its enablers. And they need to, there needs to be some measure of justice for this action, or else there will be many more.
Let's talk about what and I want to talk about how we hold those different groups of people you're talking about accountable. But let's just talk about the different types of what accountability means, right? I mean, it is, some people are saying, well, this is just performative. It's only symbolic. But it's not just, and it's that, and on some level, isn't it? I mean, accountability can also be a political accountability.
Yeah, certainly. And what we're seeing is sort of Trump gain this kind of pariah status within the broader culture, in addition to within politics. And, that's one form of accountability. It's one that we all can sort of engage in, a sort of social alienation, social distancing, as it were. So that can be part of it, but I mean, there are real consequences if we move to removal in terms of not being able to hold office again, invoking the 14th Amendment, Section 3, which has a explicit bar on those who commit these kinds of acts of whatever you want to call it, insurrection, treason. So there are some specific consequences, but the story of America in the last 20 years has been a story of impunity, elite impunity in particular, while those who followed rather than led suffer the consequences. So, I don't want to minimize what the actual people at the Capitol who broke through the gates and vandalized and in one case murdered a Capitol police officer with a fire extinguisher. I don't want to minimize what they did, but there is this sort of recurrence of a Lindy England mentality where the people who were maybe responsible for the direct action, but were not the authority figures who pushed those people into direct action, are the only ones sanctioned.
We should remind people Lindy England was one of the service members who was prosecuted for torture at Abu Ghraib. And of course, Lindy England was not responsible for setting the terms in which there would be widespread torture at Abu Ghraib. I mean, that came from, frankly, Don Rumsfeld's basically, taking the handcuffs off and they knew where that was going to lead.
And this is a pervasive problem, and it's a problem that, it sustains the fuel by which these types of actions can manifest and continue. So, apparently, anytime you use a Nazi analogy, you're just immediately thrown out of the debate. But it is true that the beer hall putsch in 1923 was a hapless, failed attempt at a coup, and Hitler went to jail for 9 months, and the political system thought they could control this faction of Germany, and 10 years later they were brought to power. And revolutions frequently fail before they succeed, and the way to stop these kinds of things from spreading is to actually hold those at the top accountable, because you can always find more shock troops.
Yeah, no, it was just the point about it being pervasive is important, because I think you can see it throughout history, the tendency to push blame downward. But even I was reminded of in the corporate sector when Wells Fargo was setting up all those fake accounts, and they fired a bunch of regional managers as opposed to holding the executives accountable. So it's a system for preserving power, and it's by design. And being conscious of the people who are pushing this conversation about a lack of accountability forward is important to understanding the overall system.
So let's. So what does impeachment achieve in terms of folks like, or let me get your sense of where this is headed. So if the vote is taking place Wednesday or Thursday in the House, there's a lot of talk about sort of punting, sending it to the Senate until after Joe Biden is able to. Give me a sense of like how real that push is and what your sense is about it, if it makes sense.
I mean, rhetorically, it really doesn't make sense, right? There's this urgent need to impeach the president and remove him from office because of near-term dangers and potential copycat or continued events like we saw in the Capitol last week. But we're going to hold it until we get the Undersecretary for Finance and the Treasury, confirmed. It doesn't make any sense, and so What we know and what the Mitch McConnell has laid out, and at least until January 20th, it's his ball game, is that there's not going to be. It's impossible for there to be a trial until the Senate resumes, and the Senate isn't going to resume until January 19th, which means it's really not possible to start any kind of action in the Senate on impeachment until a day later, which is actually 1 hour after the end of Trump's term. That's the earliest that it can begin. Now, Democrats in these pro forma sessions that are going on can try and should try to start that process sooner. But, I just, as long as Republicans have the vote, they're not going to be able to succeed. And they will have the votes until such time as Warnock and Ossoff are confirmed, and until Kamala Harris becomes the deciding vote as the vice president of the United States. So, this action isn't going to happen until after Trump leaves office. That doesn't mean that it shouldn't be undertaken, but that's just the reality. Whenever the House actually moves forward on the impeachment. As far as what does that mean for Biden?
David,
yeah, go ahead.
Well, so I don't understand. Why is it if we know that Trump's impeachment, he cannot, there's no attempt, there's no ability to get him convicted before he leaves office anyways.
Right.
What difference is it if he's convicted January 28th, let's say, versus February 28th? I mean, what difference does that make?
Well, I mean, there's, especially because the clock is going to run out, I guess there's a way that you can make that point. The problem is that Trump's going to be president when the House impeaches, right? And so then it's like, well, you're saying you're impeaching, you're saying that there's some sort of imminent possible violence that is sustained if he remains in office, and then you're going to hold it back. Because I mean, who decides the calendar shifts the moment that they move that forward, right? So the House has the decision on the timing until such time as they send it to the Senate. Then the Senate has the decision on the timing.
And then, so it puts the onus on Mitch McConnell. And I mean, I guess I was playing a little devil's advocate here, but the point being that another element that is going on here in terms of like accountability for the party, for the Republican Party, period, writ large, because I think it's inarguable that the Republican Party doesn't deserve a significant amount of blame and responsibility for what we witnessed this week. This is something they've been nurturing for years through their leader of their party. And so it is going to be on Mitch McConnell, and it is going to be on all of those Republican senators, how they vote and what machinations they do, and how hard frankly, the Democrats press the Republicans and make the point like, hey, the reason why we're not having a trial right now is because Mitch McConnell's not allowing it, is the point, right? Like, this is how you exact political accountability from a party. You try and make it very explicit that they are the ones responsible for no trial or a delayed trial or a vote against the trial, et cetera, et cetera.
And you continue to make that explicit even after January 20th. I mean, I used the analogy in the piece I was talking about. Ronald Reagan talked for his entire 2 terms about how Carter ruined the economy. And that was the reason why it didn't come back as strong as he thought. And this was years into the Reagan presidency. We'd had all of his various issues and agendas set up. He was still blaming Carter. So, the point is that the Democrats need to move forward that accountability every day against a Republican Party whose design over the last 50 years inevitably leads to the kinds of things that you saw happen on January 6th. So, the more specific part of that is that on January 20th, or assuming the Georgia senators are seated, Chuck Schumer's control of the process of the impeachment trial as soon as we hit January 20th. And so, he can make that trial go as long or as short as he wants, as long as he has the votes behind him to sustain any objections or to overrule any objections. He can make that be a 2-day trial and just get this over with and move on with whatever other business he wants to move on with. So we're thinking because Mitch McConnell's in charge now that he would be in charge of the trial, but he really wouldn't. What he's saying is, I'm going to punt until it's Chuck Schumer's problem. And then certainly, the whoever's defending Trump in this trial can, make objections and try to elongate the process. But, as long as Chuck Schumer has the votes, he doesn't have to, submit to that.
Right. It's interesting that you say that, because I remember back at my Air America days in 2005 or 6 even, a producer of mine cut up a compilation of every right-wing caller who said the word Clinton. And this is 6 years after he's left office. And it was literally like a 6-minute long thing. I'm like, I can't play this. It's just too long. But the idea being that the right has been far more successful in weaponizing the failures of other presidencies prior. There's always some measure of presidencies. The Democrats, it seems to me, their first instinct is to, and we heard this quite a bit, let's move forward. And I feel like these events have overtaken that impetus. And so it is incumbent upon those of us who want to hold the Republicans to account to sort of continue to push that thrust of reminding people and branding the Republicans with this entire era. Lastly, to that point, and then I want to move on to sort of, where that leaves us with Joe Biden and some of his picks and what he's said in the past couple of days. Is there also hearings that we're going to get in terms of like what went on with the Capitol Police? Where was the National Guard? Like, what is the TikTok here? What groups were funding this, et cetera, et cetera?
I have to think there will be. I know that the Appropriations Subcommittee that handles the Capitol Police's budget has already opened an investigation. So that's actually Tim Ryan, who's the Appropriations Subcommittee chair, and Rosa DeLauro, who's the new chair of the Appropriations Committee. So we know that there's going to be something in the House. I would imagine the Oversight Committee takes this up. I would imagine on the Senate side, the Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committee takes this up. It's pretty important. I mean, when you look at the actual reality of the Capitol Police, they have a budget of $500 million, an annual budget. It's bigger than most big cities in America. And the fact that they were caught so flat-footed, both from an intelligence standpoint, when intelligence was literally like log on to Parler, and from a response and preparation and personnel standpoint, that should raise like some super serious questions here about what are you doing with this budget. So I do hope that there will be, and I expect that there will be some sort of after action.
This is a classic one of those moments of like, you had one job. And this is like, presumably this is what all the security is about, right? Is to make sure that something like that doesn't happen. And we've talked about how.
Right. And let me say just one thing that's really, really important here. We have all the laws we need. In fact, we have more than all the laws we need to handle this situation from an intelligence and law enforcement standpoint. There's going to be a push for more tools for the intelligence agencies, more tools for law enforcement, which inevitably are perverted and used in ways that sap American civil liberties. It is crucial that we don't succumb to fear-mongering, to calls for security that are unnecessary at this point, that we need to keep our heads on this and realize that we have a vast and in many cases unaccountable amount of powers to handle situations like this. And we do not need to expand that one iota further.
Couldn't agree with you more. And just as like, I mean, for all the reasons you said, and I would just add, just imagine if Donald Trump had some of these authorities that people might want to roll in next time. And I don't mean Donald Trump, maybe it's Josh Hawley, maybe it's whoever it is. You don't want them to have that type of authority. All right, lastly on this, there's a big push. Like corporations are supposedly not going to be supporting the Republicans, or we're seeing some of that. We're seeing things like Citibank is like, we're not going to give to Republicans. J.P. Morgan, I think the other day said we're not giving to Republicans. We won't give to Democrats either for 6 months. I mean, it's sort of like we're just saving some money on our budget.
It's also saving face too. I mean, they'll temporarily put their foot off the gas pedal, and then once election season rolls around, I mean, an election cycle just ended. Very brave of them to stop donations for 6 months.
And there are no federal or state elections in the next 6 months that JP Morgan would need to contribute to.
Right, of course. So I just wanted to be able to sort of just put that in perspective. And then the other thing is we have this deplatforming that's going on. Trump is banned from Twitter. Fine. People get banned all the time for terms of service violations. But we're also watching this thing with Parler where they have basically been, for the time being, driven offline, the entire platform, because they can't get hosted by any of their servers. They claim they can't get any lawyers. They can't get any services. Where are you on this? Because I know that part of this dovetails into a wheelhouse for you in terms of antitrust.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing I would say is there's a distinction to be made between broadcasting and narrowcasting. And I don't think that trying to deplatform people who are narrowcasting, in other words, finding small groups of one another to communicate and in this case, cause violence, I don't think it's effective. If it wasn't Parler, it would be some ham radio station or podcast. It would be, fascists and revolutionaries throughout history have managed to find one another, whether there was an internet or not. And I just don't think that there's a way to keep people who want to communicate from communicating. I just don't think that exists. Maybe it's a little bit slower, but I don't think that's really going to affect them. Now, the larger thing that you're talking about with respect to, I just think that this is a coordinated PR campaign on behalf of big tech, which is under a lot of stress right now. There are active lawsuits against Google, active lawsuits against Facebook, and they're trying to get in the good graces of the political system by enforcing in terms of service that they've never enforced before, that they've largely allowed to fester. And I think the bigger problem is with the business model of these corporations, and we should focus on the business model of these corporations rather than essentially anointing them censorers in chief and protectors of one person should not have the power to decide what speech can go through, especially if that speech is, in a situation where the only way to broadcast is through their channels. I mean, that's the bigger problem, right? I mean, if there were a multitude of ways to get your message out, then what Facebook does to any one person wouldn't matter. What Google does to any one person wouldn't matter, or one organization. So I think the larger issues are around the business model, and we should keep our eyes sort of set on that goal.
Well, because it in essence undercuts their own argument that they should be able to exist as these monoliths, as these monopolies, because you can't make an argument that you're not limiting someone's speech if you're banning them from all the major tech platforms that allow them to amplify speech. I think it sets up an issue if anyone's going to go down that antitrust route.
Parler apparently has sued Amazon for antitrust
I
violation on their servers. But all right, but I want to get to these things that have been announced in the past couple of days. We have seen 3 or 4 new appointments to Biden's cabinet: Marty Walsh, Merrick Garland, today Bill Burns, and maybe maybe we have time to sort of assess these later. But one of the things that I think really was a big announcement was Joe Biden last week saying, "I'm not going to allow the politics of austerity or deficit reduction to inhibit our plans." It sounds like they're going to go really big. Talk about this. This gets into why Unsanitized you're going to be switching to the first 100 days newsletter. And that is because much of what Biden's got to do is either going to be to directly deal with COVID or to deal with the implications of COVID, or in some ways to use those two things as a mechanism in which to do sort of like to go big on a lot of projects that Democrats want.
Yeah, I think that was pretty heartening for a lot of people to see that he was not giving in to sort of deficit hysteria or tempering himself in any way, and actually using economic arguments to say that what I'm told is that spending now will be a hell of a lot better than allowing an elongated lack of demand or an elongated slow recovery and then having to pay later. So, that was really good to see. As you said, I mean, prior to Georgia, there was almost no talk of the usual kind of things that you hear during a transition, which is, what is the president going to prioritize? What is he going to go with healthcare first and then immigration, or those kinds of those kinds of decision making, which we saw in the Obama era, which we saw in the Bush era, and so forth. None of that was part of the discussion around Biden, because everyone knew that he had a 4-alarm fire the moment he came in with the pandemic, and it was going to be the all hands on deck moment, and it will be for the first 100 days. It will be the determinative of whether that time is a success. And so I felt there was no need to sort of dance around that, and realize that the beginning of this presidency and the pandemic are kind of one and the same. And so we're just going to shift. I mean, it's really just a shift of a headline, right? It's just a shift of branding, really, that we're going to do, this thing on the first 100. I mean, maybe if by April 29th, which is day 100, a good job is being seen, I can get out from under doing a daily thing every day. But prior to that, we're just going to follow how this administration is handling the overwhelming issue before us. Now, obviously there are going to be other issues too. I mean, and the Capitol riot shows, a perfect one that is going to be, leading this agenda moving forward. It's as heartening as it was to hear Biden talk about deficit spending. It was just as disheartening to hear him talk about the need for a new domestic terrorism law. So, there's going to be, because of what happened, that's going to be another ball in the air that it just broadens my ability to cover that.
Okay. And so let's talk about what Biden will do in that first 100 days a little more specifically. Now, there's going to be a more cohesive vaccination policy. I imagine that there's going to be some form of either Defense Production Act invocation or something similar to get more vaccines out there. I think we're going to see more federalization of that. How and we're going to obviously see $2,000 checks. How is this going to happen? Like, what you talked a little bit in a piece that you've written the past day or so about the potential of one sort of like tranche of this legislation to be brought to the Senate by normal means and another by reconciliation. You write that there's 3 opportunities for reconciliation over the next 2 years because it's limited to 1 each fiscal year, and reconciliation has not been used for the fiscal year that is ending. So you could have 3 major bills where you only need 51 votes, essentially, including the vice president. This gets a little Byzantine, and but with that said, everything else you need is not filibuster proof. So walk us through what you think right now it's going to look like.
So yeah, as you say, it's fiscal year 2021, 22, and 23. 2021 is what we're in right now. There's been no budget resolution, so you can do reconciliation there. Fiscal year 22 starts in September, so you could see one in the fall. And then the following year, you could also see one in the fall. So that's the 3 silver bullets. And they really are silver bullets because it's from a legislative standpoint, these are the main ways that you can get things done without needing to court 10 Republicans. So, the question is, where does this, what Biden has talked about has been a multi-trillion-dollar package that he wants to put together. Where does this fit into that? And, I think that checks has the ability to go probably on its own if he wanted to. And it could get 60 votes in the Senate. It's an extremely popular policy. It apparently had 60 votes at the end of the last Congress. It likely has it now with a more Democratic Congress. You could probably get that done. And I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this because it's almost a trust building exercise. I mean, Democrats ran on this in Georgia. They vowed to do this. There's a lot of elements of the left that doesn't trust the Democratic Party to follow through on promises like this. And it might make sense to just say, you know what, we're just doing the checks. We said we would, and here's what we're going to put on the floor, and we're going to do it. And if Republicans want to, deny an 80-20 policy in the country, let them. You could always pass it through reconciliation afterward.
Or Joe Manchin, who tried to inartfully get attention on Friday. The markets began to crash by saying that he was going to block these checks, which, I mean, it would be suicide for the party, which for the first time in years decided to make a clear case for itself and said, we're doing these $2,000 checks. But on the flip side, like you're saying, David, if you make it a clean bill, get guys like Hawley to call their bluff. Other Republicans who in their district need this kind of vote.
Yeah. And Manchin, who walked that back a little bit, said, "Oh, I just meant it needs to be targeted," which, of course,
I'm sorry, $2,000 checks? Oh, okay, no, that's
those checks, yeah. But the other idea here is that you use checks, which is very popular, to sort of smuggle in some things underneath it.
Yes,
and like state and local spending, which really needs to be done because we have serious shortfalls in the country, like more money for vaccines, which is probably the most important economic imperative right now, which, the faster that we get the vaccines out to the country, the quicker you can reopen the country, which is incalculable economically. So, there's an argument to be made there. As soon as you get something that's hot button like state and local spending in there, you're probably going to have to go through reconciliation because Republicans are just not going to give you votes on that. So a big package like Biden's talking about sounds like it would go through reconciliation, and that might take longer.
Right.
And then for days you're going to hear Democrats promise these checks, and they're not giving us these checks, and it's a way to sap that public trust. So, you really have to weigh that. Like it's the importance of a Democratic Party that did not, in the eyes of the public, deliver after 2008 in a way that was appreciable for the ordinary person, that suffered the consequences at the polls. You have to start thinking about, okay, what can we do quickly and simply and prove to our base that we're serious about tangible improvements for the American people?
I get the sense, we only have a couple minutes left here, but I get the sense that this administration, I'm starting to get the sense, this administration has, in general, learned some lessons from its participation in the Obama administration. And it comes in different forms, right? Like, I mean, this by choosing Merrick Garland, not necessarily my favorite choice for Attorney General, I think what they're really doing is setting up on that First Circuit of Appeals in the D.C. Circuit Court an opportunity to put someone in there who's going to be younger and who's going to be like more aggressive in protecting things, because this is the second most powerful court in the country, and this is going to be a very important court when it comes to maintaining the ability of agencies to function properly. I mean, we're on the cusp of a new Lochner era. And this idea of like, we need to deliver and deliver fast and not be so concerned about roadblocks that we perceive to be there. There is a sense that they have learned from that. And I don't know. I am with you on the idea of there's no reason not to bring up the checks as a standalone bill, sneak a couple of things that maybe not hot button, but are like warm button issues to make it very difficult for a Republican to vote against this bill.
You put 2,000 checks and vaccine money together, like that's a hard bill for Republicans to reject. I mean, what is in there for Republicans to reject?
Right.
It's either we don't want people to have more money, which is not a popular position, or we don't want people to get vaccinated. Yeah, I mean, I would try to keep it pretty simple, stuff like that.
Well, David Dayen, I look forward to your rebranding of Unsanitized, but in the meantime, I will continue to read it every day. And of course, I also, the American Prospect, people can find that at prospect.org. Thanks so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Okay, thanks.
All right, folks, quick break. Be right back. Wrap up the show. Well, I wanted just to highlight one point, Emma, that David made, was the potential for new legislation regarding, I mean, I think we overuse the word terrorists in this country. And I am, rather than sort of like extending the use of the word terrorist, I would like to pull back on that, because I am very much, at least in terms of what we do here on a daily basis, a product of the wake of 9/11, where there was major abuses that have gone on that in many respects haven't been corrected, and new legislation unnecessary and can involve a lot of abuse. And also, and I add, because I think that this message, the people who need to hear this message also need to be aware that Donald Trump Jr. could be president someday.
Right.
And any tools you give them to go after so-called domestic terrorists, it could be, they could expand upon what that definition means. So people need to be very careful about that type of expansion.
It's one thing to rhetorically just try to get rid of the hypocrisy and call them terrorists, which, I initially did. And maybe I walk back from that, because you're trying to say, this, if they were Muslims, this is what they'd be called. It's an entirely different thing to then say, oh, we need additional anti-terror legislation. We have enough. Use the tools at that disposal in order to fight this.
Indeed. I mean, it was not as if we weren't aware of this. It's not as if there weren't multiple attempts over the past, really, a decade and a half to focus on this on this group of people who go all the way back to Timothy McVeigh. I mean, you could actually go further than that as well, but it's been there. We will talk more about what Joe Biden and the Democrats have in store, and the accountability for what happened last week. But that will have to wait until tomorrow. We will see you then. And for those of you sticking around, Emma and I have more to talk about. Jamie's going to be joining us momentarily. Just a reminder, it is your support that makes this show possible. You can become a member of the show and support the show by going to jointhemajorityreport.com. jointhemajorityreport.com. Also, don't forget, we got merch at shop.majorityreportradio.com. We got the AM Quickie. You can check that out every morning, 6-7 minutes, headline news from a left perspective.
And left is best.
amquickie.com. And lastly, don't forget, Tuesday through Friday, the No McKee Show. You can find that at youtube.com, No McKee Show. youtube.com, the No McKee Show. There you go. So check it out. And Jamie, what's happening on the Intifada?
Well, this week on the Intifada, we spoke with our friends Arturo and Shaman, who have been doing a lot of good writing about the George Floyd rebellion. We spoke with them about the potential there to develop into an actual revolutionary situation. We talked a little bit in the bonus about this insurrection at the Capitol and how members of the communist left should relate to that. And that's coming out on Wednesday and Friday, patreon.com/The Antifada. Also, our episode from last week is still out now. The guys talk with Doug Lane from Zero Books about the philosopher Christopher Lasch, and that I'm told is an interesting episode. I haven't listened to it yet. Also, we're doing Twitch streams 4 days this week. We've almost got our schedule figured out. We're almost ready for the hard launch, but we're streaming Monday. Sean plays video games. Tomorrow, I'm doing a ladies' night with the Antifada with the editors of Lux, a new socialist feminist magazine that some of my comrades are working on. That sounds very cool. I'm very excited about that. Wednesday, we've got the full crew main show. Friday, we've got Pop Culture with Courtney Soliday, and that's at 7, twitch.tv/The Antifada. Check it out.
Matt, what's happening in the Matt Leck media empire?
So Literary Hangover had its hard launch last week, Thursday, with Malaika Jabali. We talked about the Capitol protests and also, the
Reckoning, right?
What was that?
You said Literary Hangover.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Emma. So Left Reckoning had its hard launch. Literary Hangover had its hard launch a while ago. But Left Reckoning with Malaika Jabali, we talked about the Capitol storming, and also talked about Bernie saying, hey, let's not do what we did last time we had this kind of control. So check that out. That's available. We have a public podcast feed for non-patrons now. So check my Twitter feed for that. Also tonight, Literary Hangover Twitch feed. So check that out. I'm not sure when, but it'll be probably late, maybe 10.
Damn. I mean, it's head spinning. It's head spinning. All right, we're going to take a quick break. Head into the fun half. 646-257-3920 is the number. 646-257-3920 is the number.
And for it.
All right, folks. 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Anarchy. Alpha males are back. Boys back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you can imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boys back. And the alpha males are back.
Just want to degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Almost has what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
I am a total cunt.
Can we bring back DJ Danerky's song, please?
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Danerky.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense.
Hey, folks, reminder.
I do not have Parkinson's.
And the alpha males are
psych. Fuck 'em.
Almost says what?
Almost says what?
Hell of a lot of bank. 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 Hell of a lot of bank.
All lives matter. Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
The alpha males are back. And the Africans are black Africans. The alpha males are back. And the Africans are black.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keeping it 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on! Fuck 'em. Fuck things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday! Happy birthday to me, Jew boy!
I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are back. Africans are black.
Come on! Come on! Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
We are back.
There we go.
We are back. It is the fun half, ladies and gentlemen. Let's see what we got here. Read an IM. Hey, Sam. JJ Cool says, it seems to me that social media companies waited until they hit the peak of revenue. They could make off Trump before finally taking action. Of course, there is no perfect solution, but plenty of those profits could be used to counter misinformation. Now they get to profit on the back end and play right into the conservative grievance narrative. Moses Broseph. Should right-wing news organizations be held accountable for actions of MAGA rioters, given that they have helped facilitate the spread of disinformation? If so, what does them being held accountable look like? Should they? Yeah. Will they? No. I mean, I for one think that I think that Amazon shutting down Parler's servers is stupid and ridiculous. I mean, I don't know how you force Amazon to do that other than having antitrust rules where they don't have the ability to sort of become such behemoths in that server space. And I think the accountability for for Amazon's actions will just be there will be other growths. I mean, I think that shutting down Parler, I just think it's I don't think it's long-term helpful in any respect. But I have no problem booting people off of platforms to just make the platforms less a town square and or the town square, make them a town square.
Yeah, I tried to make that point a little, but we were running out of time with David. I don't think you can make I think there is an issue that Trump was just booted off there and we have no understanding of why. I mean, it's a huge consequential decision. He's still president of the United States. Not saying it's not the right thing to do, but then you have to allow for competitors. You just do.
Yeah.
I think one thing we need to also consider here is that a lot of this was due to pressure from the workers at the companies, which is something that we should encourage, right? People having a say in their workplace. Maybe it's not a traditional labor issue, but I think that's a good thing, generally speaking.
Yeah, no, I think that part of it is good. I also suspect that a lot of it is we're about to be regulated by Democrats, and so we're about to we're going to.
Oh yeah, it's. I mean,
that's why you give in now to those workers. But I agree with Jamie. I think it should be emphasized that these workers at these tech platforms that are realizing what effect they're having on the world, having more say over it than just whatever buddies of Zuckerberg and Joel Kaplan decide. For instance,
but I think it's okay bumping Trump because it's not just what you say on these platforms. The size of your audience on these platforms should come into the calculation, right? Like, I mean, the fact is that you're trying to measure, you're theoretically doing, yes, I get that it's terms of service, and there's no way for them to subjectively assess, like, what is the damage being caused to society. But the fact of the matter is, like, a Twitter egg, if they still have that anymore, do people just have like blank eggs?
A random Twitter with four followers.
Somebody who has 4 followers, or I don't know, 100 followers, saying something is not as detrimental, saying A is not as detrimental as someone who has 7 million followers saying A, if it is a dangerous thing. I mean, I think like any reasonable assessment of that, and it's sort of like, I think that having higher standards, having less leeway as to like what thresholds for what becomes problematic based upon your follower count, I think that's perfectly legitimate. I think that, like, that concept, we have that concept in our regulations for communications across the board. You can only own so many TV stations. You can only own so many radio stations, because we don't want this cornered. And if you're going to have access to this many people, you need to have a higher level of standards in terms of what you put out there. I think that's fine. I mean, so like, the random egg who threatens, Emma or Jamie, is maybe not held to the same standard as if like somebody with 200,000 followers did, because they're speaking to 200,000 people who may act on that, as opposed to someone who's got like 25 followers, right? Like, I mean, I think that, I'm not saying that anybody should be doing that, but that's my point.
Sure. I mean, I've read cases for antitrust. I'm still skeptical of how that's going to work, because there's only one Twitter, right? You'd only break that up so much. I've read cases, pretty convincing case of Jacobin for why big tech should be nationalized. I take the ultra left position. I think it just needs to be abolished, and we need to build new technology that is based around human needs and not, getting people hooked on the serotonin boost in order to make money. But that's my long-term plan for this problem.
Yeah, I mean,
don't let Mila hear you say that.
Yeah, well, that
take
again,
away her TikTok, you're gonna have a real problem with her.
Well, TikTok is owned by the Chinese Communist Party, so they can stay.
I mean, that documentary about what it does to your brain is pretty disturbing, and I feel it happening to me in real time. I'm like, I'm just watching TV or sitting on the couch, and I get a notification. What is
Bing? That? No, it hits the same pleasure center in your brain as when you do cocaine.
Right. There's no yet you're for legalizing of drugs.
I know. Weird, right? I'm full of contradictions.
But I think I think the way that you would break up a Twitter, in some instances, it's not just about breaking them up. It is also about limiting like how they can be monetized. And, and so that becomes a big deal too. It's like, how much data can you share? Who can own it? These platforms, like I think Parler could have been a genuine rival to Twitter at one point. I mean, if it hadn't been organized around just like we're politics, right? Like, I mean, I don't know. There was
but the problem is that there's because of the antitrust thing that we're talking about, there's no legitimate way to compete with these not conglomerates, but these massive entities at this point. I think there is only one way, and that's to break them up, and then you can have these conversations. Like, we shouldn't be having to have complex free speech arguments about a private company deciding to remove the president because he violated their terms of service. Like that shouldn't be, they shouldn't be so big that their terms of service have legitimate, I think, free speech implications. No. That's the issue.
Wu-Tang Clang says, IT guy here, Amazon not hosting Parler is not a big deal. These guys want a big server platform for their garbage. Let them go to the same people who host Stormfront. If they're committed to a free market, I'm sure Sheldon Adelson can give Dan Bongino a grant to make right-wing Amazon web server. It's Rebecca Mercer is one of the owners of Parler. Did you know this?
Yeah, I actually literally just learned about this over the weekend. Right.
They have the money to get servers. It's just like they didn't do redundancy. Like, frankly,
well, they also
Kyle has a better backup plan for this stuff. Now we're not as big.
They're trying to cheap out. They want to grift people and take their money, but they don't really care about protecting the people
incidentally
that go on Parler. Come on.
Big data leak from Parler.
Right. That's what I was referencing.
Every single thing is on archive.org. So, listen, I'm not in service of a free and open web. If anybody sends me stuff they found from that leak that embarrasses people on that platform, I'll use it.
Hey.
So that's fine. I mean, as long as it's not like, something like, I don't know, like I don't want what do they call that?
Like no Hunter Biden laptop
what is that, like
stuff.
Sex? Like what happened to not like blackmail stuff like that? Nothing like
compromise.
No, but what is it? What is it like? What revenge porn? I don't want any of that stuff.
Yeah.
Ooh, jeez.
No.
I do think it's ironic in a way that gives me some cold comfort that it was these people in the first place, right? Trump, the Republicans, the Libertarians who wanted private companies to have that much power and that much control. And now it's like, oh no, they're not accountable to anyone and they're censoring people. Oh no.
True, but let's be real though, the Democrats had a huge hand in this as the takers of the most Silicon Valley money. And again, it's no coincidence that as the Democrats take a slim majority in the Senate, and as all of this goes down, that the tech companies coordinate and decide we're going to kick Trump off Twitter, which was Kamala Harris's embarrassing pet project from the primaries. I mean, I'm not being conspiratorial. I genuinely think there's some coordination with Democratic elites here.
It's not even necessarily like coordination that you need. It's just aligned interests.
Right.
These guys are in charge now. And so, we're going to do somebody from their government affairs office comes down the hall and says, like, you know what, if we want to, the best way that we can head off like a real push to regulate us is going to be to, show in the eyes of the public and the Democrats that we are, sufficiently skeptical of Republicans and whatnot. I mean, you don't even need a conspiracy. It's just like, it's quite obvious, right? Like,
I know. I think that's important context. So like,
yes,
all the people just cheering it on blindly for some sort of immediate emotional release about Trump getting kicked off. Probably not.
Yeah. I would also just stress that this wouldn't be happening if the right wing just stood up for BDS when people came after their speech. So,
yep. Yeah. All right, let's play some clips here. Let's start with AOC talking about the Republicans. All of a sudden, they want unity. Like, what? Are you kidding me? Honestly, this is it's stunning. But let's play AOC talking about this, setting the basically the bar for what it's going to take for unity. I mean, well, let's hear her explanation. I have a separate theory on what it's going to take for unity.
And, the several Republican members of Congress who opposed raising objections to certifying the Electoral College vote have written a letter to President-elect Biden opposing impeachment. Here's what the letter says. It says, in the spirit of healing and fidelity to our Constitution, we ask that you formally request that Speaker Nancy Pelosi discontinue her efforts to impeach President Donald J. Trump a second time. A second impeachment only days before President Trump will leave office is as unnecessary as it is inflammatory. They're saying for the sake of unity, forego impeachment.
Well, I think there's a couple of things. One is we have to understand that what happened on Wednesday was insurrection against the United States. That is what Donald J. Trump engaged in, and that is what those who stormed the Capitol engaged in. And so when we talk about healing, the process of healing is separate and, in fact, requires accountability. And so if we allow insurrection against the United States with impunity, with no accountability, we are inviting it to happen again. That is how serious it is. And I do not believe that perhaps my colleagues weren't in that room. Perhaps my colleagues were not fully present for the events on Wednesday, but we came close to half of the House nearly dying on Wednesday. And if a foreign head of state, if another head of state came in and ordered an attack on the United States Congress, would we say that that should not be prosecuted? Would we say that there should be absolutely no response to that? No. It is an act of insurrection. It's an act of hostility. And we must have accountability, because without it, it will happen again.
What is also interesting to me about this is that, like, the idea that these Republican senators who voted to certify the election, right? It's like, I want credit. I mean, this is literally like, you know, your 8-year-old kid going like, you know, coming up and going like, I want credit for, you know, taking a poop today. Like, I'm sorry. It's just you're just going to do that. But it's also, they are accepting the premise that this was a Republican Party project, not just like a narrow group of people, but this was a Republican Party project. So if there's going to be unity, don't hold these people to account, because too much of them are what they did is associated with too much of our party for it to be sort of a distinct project. And so, I mean, that's pretty telling. And just the idea that, like, let this slide. Are you kidding me? It's insane.
I know. Well, I mean, we have a history of letting lawlessness like this slide. I mean, we did not sufficiently go after the criminals in Watergate in the name of national unity. Reconstruction was part of that effort, was
Iran-Contra,
national unity, right? And then what do you know? We got Jim Crow. And like, have we not learned from our constant capitulation to the people who are assaulting the supposed democracy that we live in? Have we not learned about the consequences of not holding them to account, because we keep getting worse? We went from Nixon, we went to Reagan, we went to Bush, we went to Trump, and like the illegality gets even more ridiculous, not to mention democratic illegality. So like, there has to be some sort of reflection, which progressives are providing, as to what are the consequences of our not doing anything about this. I mean, and then my point is that there are Democrats who are siding with this Republican view, and like are
there anymore though? I don't think so. I mean, even Chris Coons was talking about like ejecting Hawley and Cruz from the Senate. Now, and that's an interesting dynamic, because, you know, you got Joe Biden.
You're right.
Joe Biden's coming out there and saying, like, you know, we need a Republican Party, but his guy Coons is in the Senate saying something else. I mean, that is not, Chris Coons is not freelancing here. I mean, this is a bit of a pincer move, but I also want to make the point that, like, I think that you can draw a line between Mitch McConnell refusing to have hearings on Merrick Garland and this type of behavior. Like, it's just, each time you expand what is acceptable in the context of our politics, you're expanding it. And the idea that you would not have accountability for this, for the people who encourage this, it is impossible to imagine that it wouldn't happen again. It's still very possible that this is going to happen again. I mean, this is the way this happens, right? It takes another 5-10 years, starts to brew, and something like this happens.
And they're already doing trial runs. And sorry, Jamie, just quick point. They're already doing trial runs of overthrowing democracy in state legislatures, like in Pennsylvania. I mean, the Republican Party is going to look at this, because we have lawmakers who are siding with Trump on this, and it's going to be copycatted. They're an authoritarian party, and they follow what the leader does, and this is going to happen again. So exactly why you need accountability.
It's going to be, I was just going to say, it's going to be a lot sooner than 5 to 10 years, I think, because, you know, the Republicans lost the election. They tried to steal it through legal means, through the courts, and that didn't work. And now we have a branch of this movement that's going to try to steal elections through extra legal means in the streets. So that represents a further progression, a further step in that chain, even as this party becomes fractured between the different elements, and they're even, having a little lovers quarrel with the cops right now, which is kind of nice to watch. But I mean, I'm of two minds listening to AOC here, because obviously it is a bad idea to be like, oh, we just need to turn the page and have unity. It's giving me flashbacks to Iraq, and all the horrible people in the Bush administration who were never prosecuted for war crimes. Like, if we're going to have laws, which, for the moment we do, you might as well use them against right-wing ghouls who want to take this country in an even more fascist direction. But of course, the thing that I think was bad about the Capitol insurrection was not that it was an insurrection, not that it broke the laws, because actually those things could be good wielded in the proper context. It's that it was a right-wing fascist white nationalist movement.
I mean, I have a problem with, at least in the context of, I mean, I guess I can imagine a scenario in the future where we have a different form of government and something like that would be appropriate. But in the context of the way that our government is structured right now, I just don't think there is any scenario. I mean, if tomorrow, or if, let's say, I don't know, a year ago or 2 years ago, when it was Republican dominated House and Senate and Republican president, I would not have been in favor of a leftist group of people doing that. I mean,
I wouldn't be in favor of it either, because it just isn't going to work at this point in time.
Yeah, I also think
and 5 people died too.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, I don't think you should be.
It's dangerous. It's ineffective. There's a lot of different reasons why I wouldn't want my people doing that.
You're not going to get any kind of democratic, revolution coming from handcuffing people with zip ties, I don't think.
Or I'll say this, without the social base for it, it's just a pointless temper tantrum, right? I don't advocate the communist left to be coming in and doing stuff like this right now for a lot of different reasons. And I want to make that very clear. But, if we had a base for proletarian revolution, like, sorry, it's an inconvenient truth, but we fought one civil war to end slavery, and I think it's going to take another one to really finish the job of Reconstruction.
I mean, if there were that base existed theoretically in this country, you wouldn't need that. And
that too.
And it would have to be a much different government, that in which case you would have that type of base and would need that in my,
it's true. Like the primary work is base building work. And the more people get on board, the less violence there's bound to be. But, a lot of these people are very invested in whiteness. They're very invested in capitalism. They're very invested in the system. And we saw that very clearly, and they're not going to go quietly.
Here is Charlie Kirk. He is on with this guy, Steve Hilton, on Fox News. Now, Charlie Kirk, he's had a rough couple of days, ladies and gentlemen. He's had to delete tweets where he was bragging about sending buses of people, funding the transportation of buses of people down to this insurrection. And so here he is on Fox News now talking about what it's going to take to build unity. If you've watched even 5 minutes of anything that Charlie Kirk has had to say over the course of the past, 4 or 5 years, the idea that this guy's now calling for unity should be an indication that he sort of feels like he's on the losing end of something.
Welcome back. With a 50-50 split in the Senate and a Democratic majority in the House, the left will be pushing hard for a second impeachment this week if the 25th Amendment is not invoked, as Nancy Pelosi has just tonight called for. With only days left in President Trump's term, is this really what the country needs right now? Charlie, is it?
Absolutely not. I mean, only further rip our country apart. I mean, the promise of former Vice President Joe Biden is to try to heal the country, and this would only tear the country apart, almost on a political revenge campaign. This is the last thing the country needs right now, but the Democrats, as Tammy mentioned in the previous segment, their goal right now is to try and almost erase the entire history of the Trump administration and the presidency that he's had. They want to
pause it. Oh, we're going to talk about erasing history. We're talking about erasing history as you're pretending like an insurrection that just happened, a violent attempt, a violent mob that came in and 5 people are dead, including your beloved cops. You want to pretend that didn't happen. That's the exact fiction that you're adhered to. Nobody else is trying to erase anything. That's what you're trying to do. Justice versus pretending this didn't happen.
And the real question is like, wait. Why is there such a tear in the fabric of American society that it needs to be healed? I mean, you just had 4 years of half of it total Republican control, the other half of it with the control of the Senate and the presidency. Why is there no accountability for the lack of unity in this country from the Republican Party? I mean, that is a failure of, well, I don't know, to the extent that he can even say that with a straight face, makes it a failure on some level of of the politicking by Democrats on some level. Because I mean, it was just the sheer existence of Barack Obama was polarizing for people for whatever reason.
And what could it be?
All right, continue to play Charlie Kirk.
Of the Trump administration and the presidency that he's had. They want to eliminate everything. They want to try to make sure that another positive populist movement can never rise again. And so that this is a strategic plan.
Another one?
By Nancy Pelosi. And boy, if you want to just continue these awful divides and try to anger half the country, I guess this is the playbook to do that.
Yeah, I mean, what might have been more divisive would have been the gang of people trying to overthrow the election and a dozen senators and over 100 members of Congress siding with them. But yeah, let's just pretend that didn't happen. So, I mean, talk about erasure.
Short-term memory erasure.
Every time I hear the word populism come out of one of these guys' mouths, I just cringe.
Yeah, it's just they think populism is just saying curse words when you're the president. That's their kind of idea of it.
I mean, populism is like kind of a nebulous, vague, therefore bad thing, right? Because right-wing populism is a real thing, but it makes me nervous anytime the right and the left get collapsed into one like that. Certainly when people like Charlie Kirk pretend like this is a movement that is really a grassroots movement for the people, for the working people of this country.
Yeah, it's pro-boss populism.
It's totally grassroots, which is why I was responsible for sending 8 buses of people from the millions of dollars that I get from my right-wing billionaires. Here is, let's go to the phones. Calling from a 308 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? 308. 308.
Hey, sorry about that. Bad service.
Kowalski from Nebraska, if I'm not mistaken.
No, you're not. Sorry, I'm cleaning some stuff outside with a pressure washer. But hey.
Love it.
What happened on Wednesday?
Did I what?
Did you guys hear about what happened on Wednesday?
Little thing at the Capitol?
What happened on Wednesday?
So I heard from a cop buddy of mine that works at the Capitol building that an army of incels attacked.
Incels.
They were horrified. I mean,
I thought you were about to say they were. I thought you were about to say they were horny.
Might touch them.
Yeah, well, I haven't.
What was that?
I haven't delved that deep into the
it.
into the incel stature of a lot of those people. Although I would imagine there's quite a few.
Well, if you think about it, being an army of incels would explain why the police kept falling back. I mean, you don't want those people to touch you.
I don't know, man.
They're gonna be sticky.
they were outnumbered significantly. And if they had, you know, in that type of situation, you wonder, like, they were just outnumbered. And I don't know what other option they had besides falling back. I mean, there's a lot of footage. I don't know if I mean, I've spent some time over the weekend looking at the footage. I mean, they were outnumbered. There was no way they were going to stop these people. The real problem had to do with who was responsible for leaving so few officers there to deal with this crowd.
Preparation.
Preparation is where it falls, like the implicit biases of not caring about this group coming in. So we're not going to set up like we would for a Black Lives Matter protest as opposed to cops on the scene.
That does remind me of something else. In the event, we're going to have more protests over the summer for Black Lives Matter and just movements. Everyone should probably get NordVPN. Because I have a feeling that we're going to see a crackdown from the authorities on any type of public gathering.
Buddy, ExpressVPN.
Yes, ExpressVPN.
No, NordVPN's a different thing.
What's NordVPN?
That's a TYT sponsor, I think.
Oh, yeah. No, we're getting ExpressVPN, buddy.
And use Signal to communicate with your comrades.
Agents sent me the wrong list of sponsors, so...
All right, Kowalski.
We'll get back to that.
Yeah, secret TYT.
Is that where you got that one, Kowalski?
Yeah, my Soros list might be slightly out of date. I mean, you got to remember, they spent a lot of money getting Antifa to instigate that crowd. I mean, there were 3 or 4 Antifas there that tricked over 1,000+ people into committing treason. So, I mean, that took a lot of grassroots on the ground.
Well, Kowalski, it also took, knowledge of how to herd animals. So, I mean, what were you doing in the lead up to that?
I'm not at liberty to say. I certainly am not carrying a small EMP device around that shields me from any type of photography. But yeah.
All right. Well, there it is.
But yeah, as far as herd animals go, I think I could corral them. It wouldn't be that difficult.
Kowalski from Nebraska. Thanks for the call, bud.
All right. Happy New Year's, everybody.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Great start.
Oh, yeah. It's crazy. I keep forgetting, it's only 5 days into this.
I know.
Calling from a 917 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Yes.
There we go. Let's go. Call from a 704 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, this is Jackson from North Carolina.
Jackson from North Carolina. What's on your mind?
Hey, just wanted to call in. Got a bone to pick with you all, actually. So I know you've been making fun of Tommy Tuberville a lot.
Yeah.
And, I just think that's kind of unfair. Sure, he doesn't know anything about the Civil Rights Act. He doesn't know that he doesn't have the power to, overturn the election, even though he's not a sitting senator. But, he is a member of the Senate, right? And the Senate is supposed to represent the American people. So I would wager him being one person in the Senate equates to 1% of the population. Well, I would definitely say that 1% of the population does not know anything about the Civil Rights Act.
Fair enough. He is a good representation of some of the ignorance that is out there. That's true. In fact, I would also argue that not only is he representative of it, he is almost the amalgamation of it. He has all of that ignorance in him.
Yes.
Appreciate the call.
And he's a football coach. Yeah, go Tigers.
Who is it? The Tigers?
Auburn.
Yeah.
Well, that's War Eagle. The Tigers is LSU, right?
No, he was the Auburn coach.
I'm saying in terms of the cheers that people say. Go Tigers is LSU.
All right, well,
never mind.
Get off my ass, Brendan, will you?
Well, I know that my girlfriend's from Texas, so I'm learning all about the different things people say about their college football teams in the South.
Yeah,
the forgotten man and woman of this country, as Donald Trump said.
Yeah, I did do it in the in kind of the voice of the LSU head coach. What's his name? Ed.
Coach O.
Coach O. Yeah.
You guys are putting me in a fugue state.
I was going to say, like, I'm just sitting here just going back and forth. Militant Apathy says both are right, but it is the Tigers. One more call. Calling from a 404 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, this is CJ from Atlanta.
CJ from Atlanta. What's on your mind, CJ?
Nothing much. I just want to say hey to everyone. I wanted to actually thank Matt. I think it was Matt who recommended it. But I've been listening to the QAnon Anonymous podcast.
Oh my!
Is that you, Matt, that recommended that?
Yeah, I do like that show. Yep.
Yeah, I've been binging it like nonstop, and I highly recommend it to anyone out there. They just released like a 2-hour episode going over the coup attempt, and it was kind of crazy because for weeks they'd been covering these people, like the Q shaman, especially at like QAnon Anonymous or QAnon rallies in different states. And then you see these pictures from the Capitol of all these like different characters that they've covered in the past, and it's like Avengers Endgame for QAnon. It was unbelievable. So if you want any like background to a lot of people that are there, the podcast goes over really, really well.
Jeez, that's interesting. Folks can check that out. Yeah, I mean, I hope it's like the end game, but I'm not quite convinced it is.
Oh no, yeah, my biggest fear right now is that now that these conspiracy theorists have like married into the right wing militia, societies and culture around America, like that's my biggest fear is these people getting this military training from these right wing lunatics. So
I mean,
but left is best.
I appreciate it, CJ. Thank you.
Call.
And worth pointing out, some of them are veterans.
Without a doubt, and off-duty police officers.
Yep.
Flashing their badges to the guys that they were storming.
Yeah, and I do think that like it would not be surprising, right, if some of these military police officers see the value in having these QAnon troops. Like, this is why you have conferences, right? I mean, this is why you go to it's why we go to Netroots Nation. It's like, hey, I'm going to meet, spokesperson for, this candidate. And so I'll be able to maybe invite them on the show or, look, I found a place to get merch, who has like good union shop and this and that. Like, that's what one of the things that will come out of this is that you have alliances between these disparate groups, all of whom seem to be very, very amenable to doing horrible things. Here is Brian Kilmeade on Fox and Friends. This is from the day after the assault on the wait, was it the day after? Or was it the day of? Wait,
it
no,
had
I'm
to be
sorry.
the day after because they're on in the morning.
Is this from today? This is from today.
Which clip?
Right. Okay. This is number 5. Sorry.
Today.
Him basically saying, we need to move on. We have been just too mired with everything that happened 4 days ago.
As Marco Rubio said, as Senator Rick Scott said, as these other people have said, are you going to be kidding me? You know that this country is ready to explode. You saw what happened. You see the anger that the 74 million people feel because the president said repeatedly that he was robbed, but he's unable to prove it in 70-plus cases. But people who are supportive of him, who feel frustrated and shut out, are ready to explode. So you would think good leadership would bring down the temperature a little, look to turn the page, be inclusive, and move the country forward in a way we haven't been moved forward in the last.
Yeah.
How the F do you do that? You've just outlined the president, based upon no evidence whatsoever, has ginned up supposedly all 74 million are this upset about it. Okay, let's assume that's true. 74 million are really upset about it. Well, like how by moving forward is Joe Biden supposed to magically make these 74 million people not feel bad about it? Are these 74 million? Again, this is the same situation. Is he suggesting that every single Trump voter in the country is in favor of going in and killing a cop, of going in and causing the death of 5 other people, of going in and smashing the Senate? I mean, is that what he's saying?
Even some of the people who were there didn't do that. They just wanted to hold signs and yell.
Exactly. Like, is he saying they all endorse these actions? Well, everybody keeps all of these right wingers keep repeating this notion of like somehow it's an offense to all the people who voted for Donald Trump if you hold these people to account for like pounding on a cop with an American flag. Like, really? Is that the case? Because if that's the case,
yeah,
I don't think this is just going to go away on its own. If Joe Biden gets out there and says like what? Like, hey, I like you? Like, what is exactly supposed to happen?
They supported a Muslim ban. And now they're saying, oh, this is like, going after the specific group of people is too much of a broad strokes critique on a group of Trump supporters. Please.
Is there any more of that footage?
But people who are supportive of him, who feel frustrated and shut out, are ready to explode. So you would think good leadership would bring down the temperature a little, look to turn the page, be inclusive, and move the country forward in a way we haven't been moved forward in the last 20 years. Wrong. She wants to go ahead and do impeachment. And just when you think we're going to go through this tedious, terrible process again, even though he's only got 9 days left in office, they'll pass it through the House. Get this, hold it, because in January 19th is when the Senate comes back, for 100 days. This is Jim Clyburn's brilliant idea. Then they're going to take it up. While he's out of office, we'll impeach him. Will be great. So that'll really bring the temperature down. If you wanted to mobilize and reunite any fracture that might exist in Trump world, you have done it, because that spackled everything right back together quickly because they realize how irrational you are as a leader, Nancy Pelosi and everybody else that signs on.
Okay, 33 Benghazi hearings. I just looked up the official number. 33 Benghazi hearings. I was seeing that Daryl Issa, my old friend, was on TV saying how basically we need to turn the page, which is clearly their new marching orders. One more person now has died in these Capitol attacks than in Benghazi. They were calling to lock up Hillary Clinton. Lock her up. I mean, I know this was about the emails, but it gets a little convoluted with Benghazi, too. And now they're talking about national unity.
When you attack the institution of our democracy, who's responsible for providing the unity? Like, why is it the fact that just like they were able to stop them from whatever it was, executing, kidnapping the vice president, the people in the House and the Senate? Why is it Joe Biden's responsibility? Like, how does he bring them to the table? No, it's actually people more like Brian Kilmeade who have a greater responsibility to talk to the insurrectionists who watch his show every day and say, hey, you guys got to chill. Instead, he's sitting there inflaming resentment. In fact, Brian Kilmeade should be held to account. If we need unity, what's he doing to create unity? I, for one, don't believe that we need unity, so I can continue to polarize. But he, who's calling for unity, what's he doing to support that? Nothing.
And they care about unity so much that they continue to support the president that incited the attacks on the Capitol.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I can't think of anything.
I'm starting
more
to think that Brian Kilmeade is a little bit disingenuous.
You might be right. You might be onto something.
Unity for me, not for thee.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
It seems like a lot of the Democrats are actually pissed this time, though. Like, I feel like they're in
fear for their lives. Like, okay, now we know how to get the Democrats united behind something. Like, make it personally affect them. It's the rule that we applied to Meghan McCain, right? Now that she has experienced how hard it is to have a kid, now she supports universal childcare. I mean, maybe we just I'm joking, obviously. I feel terribly that it was so traumatic, especially for even like the good Congress members too, right? The people on our side. But like, that's what gets them to see the clear and present danger in front of them, but not for all these Republicans.
I could still see them having a situation like in that movie, The Purge, election year. You know what I'm talking about? Where like the Hillary Clinton character has been kidnapped, tortured, and almost killed by the fascists, the new founding fathers party, the party of the purge, which, by the way, Josh Hawley has real like new founding fathers energy, I think. And all she could say to them is, I'm going to beat you so bad in November.
Yeah. Wow.
Here is Brian Kilmeade. We just heard him talk about how like the idea of any type of accountability for the president encouraging, leading, creating, developing this insurrectionist attack. We just need to move on and forget about it and move past. But here he is, to his credit, talking about, and Jose, he's basically talking about there is a 5-alarm fire, though, in the country.
88 million Trump Twitter followers are without Donald Trump. Donald Trump loses 35 million Facebook followers. And the Parler he was gaining on turbo speed. That is shut down because they decided they didn't like it. This, to me, is a 5-alarm fire for America. And I think Democrats should unite with Republicans on this and say, hey, even though we didn't like the president, isn't it kind of scary that Amazon, Google, Apple, and every other site that is able to stop somebody like this even can put their competitive juices aside and just shut people down? I mean, look what else happened to the president. The PGA has decided not to let him have the PGA tournament at his golf course. Okay, fine. Apple, Facebook, Google, Instagram, Pinterest, Reddit, Shopify, Snapchat, Spotify, TikTok, Stripe, Twitch, and Twitter all agree on this. The president is dangerous, but Bashir Assad isn't. I told Khomeini isn't. All these crazy other things that we've seen on Twitter is allowed to be out there. It is unbelievable that people are saying, I have an idea. The Democrats are taking power in the House, the Senate, and the White House. How do we make sure regulation isn't oppressive and suffocating? I think I'll silence their number one nemesis, the President of the United States. And Marco Rubio says, you should all be scared.
Can I just say,
I can't.
No
they
PGA
took away
tour.
his PGA golf thing. This is horrific.
An assault.
If Khomeini had inspired a riot in the Capitol, I think Twitter would take his account down probably too.
Yeah. Well, actually, yeah, the Ayatollah is a lot more responsible social media user than Donald Trump. Again, I'm very conflicted about this Trump ban. I know that's not a popular left thing right now, just because of what it says. But like the idea that this is where you reserve your outrage.
Exactly.
And again, like they smash the windows of their beloved symbol of American democracy, right? The thing they talk about. It's the Capitol building. This is the place that you go to when you want to experience the aura of our founding fathers and the American exceptionalist ideal and look how great we are. Like if Black Lives Matter had scuffed the outside of the Capitol building, it would have been an outrage. And they're literally, they killed a cop with a fire extinguisher and then they smashed the windows through and they tried to kidnap Mike Pence. Like
if there was Black Lives Matter protesters scaling the wall of Congress would be played on a loop on that network.
God.
There would be no, I mean, it would be the amount of times that you would see that clip would be etched in your brain.
We would be halfway to North Korea if Black Lives Matter beat a cop to death with an American flag.
My God.
Oh my God. What if there were Muslims? What if there were Muslims that tried to scale the walls? We'd be at war with every Muslim country in the Middle East. Doesn't matter.
The awesome thing about this too is that not only does Kilmeade reserve his greatest outrage for the PGA changing where it's going to locate one of its golf tournaments, or the fact that Donald Trump, like all these 80 million people were bereft of Donald Trump on Twitter, and he was building his Parler following, like it was huge. Like he was going to come out with a whole new duct tape craft a line that he was going to put on Parler. He was going to do videos. He was going to sell a lot of duct tape wallets. The idea that all of this outrage is there, and then he just sort of skims across like these outfits were afraid of regulation. Well, hey, dude, maybe you've stumbled onto something that you should talk about with a little bit more, maybe you should like dwell on that whole thing about the regulation.
Thoughtfulness?
Maybe there's a reason why you would want something like net neutrality, right? Because this is the exact same dynamic of what's going on, where a company dominates a certain space and decides that they have control over who gets to use these pipes. I mean, this is, make no mistake about it. In the absence of net neutrality, you give me another 10 or 15 years and it's going to be just like Verizon is going to be basically saying like, yeah, no, Donald Trump, we don't even care about Parler anymore because nobody can get it. We're just going to, it doesn't matter how they're doing it. You're not going to get it through our pipes, period.
Well, I mean, he's also stupid. There are people on that network who aren't idiots. Like Kilmeade is only interested in the most surface level critique about anything. He can't even do the Tucker Carlson pretend thing. So it's just, I could rail against big tech and kind of divert populism in my own nefarious ways in the vein of Tucker Carlson, but no, I'm just gonna fall back on lazy right wing discrimination against us. Like that's the only mode he knows.
Let's go for some IMs here. Bullprog, thank you, Jamie, for continuing to cover George Floyd and community. We're still out here holding 4 blocks for the 24 demands for justice. It's in Minnesota.
Oh, yeah.
P-word. Could any right-wing media figures face charges for inciting the riot? I don't know. It's conceivable.
Well, I mean, it depends on who you're talking about. There's a few that were on Dave Rubin's show, like Elijah Schaffer, who was the one who tweeted out the "I'm with the revolutionaries" in Nancy Pelosi's office picture. And he was, I think, trying to, I don't know. I don't know that I want to see him press charges with. I don't know specifically what he did with the crowd, if he was covering it as a journalist with the Blaze. But like people like that might get caught up in this, definitely.
Also, if TikTok was taken down, 15-year-olds would literally burn the Capitol to the ground.
That's what I was saying. Remember when Trump announced his TikTok ban a few months ago? And I said on Twitter, nothing's going to come of this. This is like one of his other symbolic actions. And what do you know? TikTok's still around.
There it is. Sunni Tulp. I'm doing dry January in solidarity with Emma. Such betrayal.
I'm so sorry. I really, I know no one will believe me, but I had only committed to a week. Which is a total
I don't
cop-out.
think so. Don't piss down my back and tell me it's raining.
Sam Cedar OnlyFans downloaded the Peacock app and got a bonus of seeing They Live, starring the lovely and talented Roddy Piper, is available as well. Good stuff on there.
They live.
Sorry.
Great film.
The Beers loves you. New York Times Magazine had a decent analysis of last Wednesday, but most important in the piece was a quotation of Arendt, "The lie outlives the liar." What do you think of the lasting impressions of Wednesday and the greater conspiratorial era we are in? I got to say, the absence of footage from inside the Capitol and how long it took to disseminate, I think is a little bit problematic. I mean, you look at had there been video of those guys, standing at the door holding their guns out because they think that these people are coming into the chambers. The video of the cop who shot that woman. I mean, I think there was genuine fear. And I think it was, the fear was warranted that they were coming in to kill the lawmakers.
Well, I mean, they literally threw an AP photojournalist over a wall.
Yep.
So I'm not.
Imagine what they would have done to a staffer just caught in the middle of that, like if they went to the bathroom or something.
I covered the inauguration, and that was when they set cars on fire and stuff, and they had tear gas and everything, and I just feeling that in your eyes and stuff. It's scary, and I don't blame reporters for not following the mob inside.
No. I mean, I think they would have if they could have, but I don't know. I would be a little bit nervous about that too.
And then, these folks get to control the narrative a little bit more with their own self-created images, my friend Jared wrote a really good article in Hard Crackers that I encourage everybody to read. It's a leftist journal about, he ends on the imagery coming out of this thing, right? With this guy, maybe a business owner, probably judging by who was there, but dressed as a proletarian with his feet up on Nancy Pelosi's desk. And even I, hating these people as much as I do and knowing that they would like to murder me for being a communist and a Jew, there was a base libidinal thrill just in seeing our institutions disrespected like this because everybody hates them. And we need to ask, what is the alternative? Because for low information people out there, even if they think Trump's an asshole, that's something that they're thirsty for. And the closest thing I've seen to that maybe is when Black Lives Matter kind of defaced the outside of a CNN building in Atlanta. But our job is always going to be harder because we understand that's not really where power resides. And the work of, the actual working class revolution is unsexy. It's unglamorous. It's a lot of spreadsheets for the most part until it erupts into something more. So just some thoughts I've been having about that.
Good point. I mean, elections are won with very often with the sentiment of throw the bums out. And this is in many respects like an extension of that. And unless you show the violence and the sort of the nature of what it was, I mean, that, those type of pictures, like when people say he put his feet on Nancy Pelosi's desk, that concept, I mean,
that's what people, I think Corey Robin describes as Burkean. I think when people are getting too into, you're like Kenneth Burke, not Kenneth Burke, Burke talking about the princess in the French Revolution or whatever.
I don't want these people to have a chance to control the media images and make themselves look cool.
Without a doubt. I mean, that is a real danger. I look at that picture and I'm like, I mean, he put his shoes on her feet. I think what was really more of the issue was they were terrifying these other human beings with violence, as opposed to that is really rude. You don't go in and kick back and put your feet on somebody's desk. I mean, what if your feet are dirty? I don't know. It doesn't. The Tim Caucus wanted to ask about Sam's knee ankle compounding injuries analogy last Friday. Was that generally the idea I've heard from Jamie, that Marxist superstructures are caused by a base, but take a life of their own and need to be addressed both separately and jointly with capitalism?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying.
That's like a Frankfurt School thing with culture, definitely.
There you go. Militant apathy. I don't think they are actually attacking CNN. Atlanta PD Zone 5 precinct is in the CNN center. Wait a second.
Yes, that was. I remember that happening, and then there was that correction, was because there was a police office right next to CNN.
Well, I mean,
I think they were attacking both.
I think the other comparison is just what happened to the precinct in Minneapolis and how popular that was. Although even if you look closer at that, there might have been some boogaloo or whatever activity on that. Generally, people looked outside of any sort of specific details and were like, this is roughly just, whereas only 45% of Republicans, which is this is what it takes to split the Republicans, I guess, is this kind of exercise in violence.
How would breaking up big tech and social media platforms impact organizing on the left? My impression is that a lot of momentum was generated by the Sanders campaigns, was fueled by social media. I mean, look, I don't think, would it inhibit organizing a little bit, but not much. And certainly everybody would be put on the same on the same standing. I mean, look, even Howard Dean back in 2004 raised a ton of money via the internet. I think breaking these things up does not mean that you won't have the tools to organize. It basically just means that you have to coordinate where you're going to be. I'll meet you on this service versus that service. That it would be different, but not necessarily worse. I don't know. I just remember when people break up AT&T. Are you crazy? Ma Bell into like 5 different like phone companies. Like it's fine. We adjust.
And most organizing doesn't happen on social media. Not the effective kind anyway.
Yeah, it might refocus in a positive way.
Certainly not like on just like a broad base of social. I mean, that's where you can recruit people to some extent, but I'm not worried about that. Pano, we need to include nationalization, democratization talks in these Parler, Twitter, Amazon antitrust conversations. In these instances where we're talking about middlemen hosting, including hosting sales, Amazon, the impetus to nationalize seems the same to me as for nationalizing insurance. There's a utility in one public square. That's why we call it that. It just needs to be publicly owned. Look, nationalizing insurance brings up a lot less issues than it does nationalizing a town square. A town square, like for instance, all the First Amendment issues become highly problematic, it seems to me, and complicated. And the way that I just prefer it to get smaller. Like, we know how insurance functions. It has basically one primary function. A town square can have so many different functions that it just gets far more complicated. I prefer to just basically allow the town square to be the town square and not, I wouldn't mind nationalizing, let's say, like the infrastructure of, because it is in many respects should be neutral, period. There really should not be, I don't think you do that moderation or anything like that on the level of actually like providing the infrastructure, right? Like the pipes, as it were, to the internet. But when you start talking about being in charge of moderating content, would there be no moderation of content? Or would you just have a team of government workers who are in charge of let's say, pornography? Or would you have a team of government workers who are on there basically saying like, hey, you know what you're selling is a little bit too close to, I don't know, prostitution? Or like, would you want like a government entity to say like, hey, you're promoting sedition, we're going to ban you? Like, I just think that
and send it down the hall to the authorities.
Send it down the hall to the authorities, or it's like, well, look, we have a problem with this just in terms of like the government authority when it comes to like, I still remember the story. I mean, I referenced this, and I hope people don't really think I'm like just using an exaggeration to make a point. The FBI surveilled vegans for protesting what I think was like a pork processing plant. I don't know if it was like in Georgia or North Carolina. I mean, like this authority, I don't think that we should even be giving it to like to law enforcement. But never mind like the division of internet moderation or the division of social media moderation. Like, I just don't want, and then the idea of like, oh, well, now that we're here, that data that we don't want Facebook to have about you, we have it. And I just got a call from the DEA and they want us to share it with you. Like, I think we want to put up roadblocks to that type of stuff, not tear down or make it easy. I don't want Josh Hawley to hold an apparatus that gets to determine that. I mean, frankly, I don't want Joe Biden to either, but I'm just saying Josh Hawley to, because that may resonate with some people more. I prefer just like some of these things are just not as, I don't know. I mean,
fundamentally, the problem is how like a few monopolies control the tubes to all this stuff, right? Like, that's really the problem here.
Yeah. And okay, you guys know what my position is on this, but I will say, if you're interested in reading about the case for public ownership of big tech companies, you could just Google Jacobin nationalized big tech and a bunch of stuff will come up. Because also, I don't trust Josh Hawley or Joe Biden with this immense amount of data and power and control over speech, and not just speech, but like the ability to surveil people. But there is a case to be made that the answer to that is just creating more democratic institutions that have the ability to oversee and regulate this stuff.
I have no problem with oversight and regulation. I mean, I would go to the hilt on regulate. I mean, that's what
as if we nationalized it, I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like that is the solution to that problem, according to, the
I think Ma Bell is a good maybe model for that, actually. Like all these companies, once they do achieve this sort of monopolistic control over communications, sorry, but you're under, you have to, I mean, then you do still come under problems that you have with Sam. Like, are the Republicans going to have an equal say on whatever committee is oversight, right? Like, there are problems there, but I do think that's how this needs to be attacked, aside from the monopoly antitrust issue.
And the other thing is that we have to realize, like, there's no perfect solution. I don't even know if there's a particularly good solution, right? As it's like I just don't know that there is one that is going to check off all the boxes that we want to check off in terms of what happens on these platforms. It's just a question of what is the least worst solution, I think, for this.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. Certainly in the short term, my solution is a little farther off, shall we say.
Right. Of course, this is all, I'm just doing it in my lifespan. That's all that's all I'm going to focus on. But
that's so short though.
I know. That's my point. Such a narrow window. Calling from a 530 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Hey, this is Eric from San Diego.
Eric from San Diego. What's on your mind?
Before I get into my spiel, I just want to offer my really deepest condolences to y'all for the loss of Michael. He meant a lot to me, even though I never met him. But what I wanted to talk about was I'm a member of Socialist Alternative, and my comrade in Seattle is Sharma Sawant. Tim, I know you know who she is, but in case your audience doesn't, she's a city council member up there, and she's responsible for a lot of really good progressive policies going on. Most notably, this last year, they got a tax on Amazon. And as you'd expect, big business is pretty pissed off about it, and they're trying to recall her. And I just wanted to get on the air and kind of push back on that. She's got a campaign going on to fight the recall.
I didn't realize there was a recall attempt. I had no idea. And Sharma Sawant was like the first. She was, in many respects, like, I think, at least in terms of like national recognition, the first socialist in this era, I feel like, that got national attention.
Yeah. And I mean, it's as far as a, dyed-in-the-wool Marxist, she, I think, is probably the highest profile out there. And, because of that, she's been unwilling to, compromise her values the way that we see the Democrats do all the time. And with the working class movement, she's been able to just do tremendous things. Members of Socialist Alternative across the country and around the world are fighting to resist this recall campaign. And if any of your listeners want to go to Shama Solidarity, that's KSHAMA Solidarity.org, they can pitch in and help out.
We will. We'll put that in the show notes for today, so people can find it on YouTube or the podcast description.
Thanks so much.
All right.
Solidarity with y'all.
Appreciate the call. Thank you.
Guys, can I cut in here for a moment? Dave Rubin is on with Tulsi Gabbard, and they're talking about the social media purge. But some bad news is the chat is disabled.
A couple minutes just to.
Oh no!
For this
What free
live
speech?
stream about
And everything that's going on right now. I know this is a little bit different, obviously, than our usual direct messages. We'll get back to the daily grind.
So, good luck, Tulsi.
This is like a perfect storm for me. My two favorites. They just
There it is. This is the. I mean, on some level, it's also why I think like it's not helpful politically, particularly in this moment, to give them some like talking point so that the whole thing. The whole attack on the Capitol, that's last week. This week, it's an attack on our ability to use Parler because they didn't have a backup option from after Amazon. Look, this is a good moment to use this right-wing outrage and talk about antitrust and as a way of like inhibiting the ability and frankly jam the Democrats on some level. So that they have to respond to the size of these, not just the big tech. I would, expand it. I mean, this would be a good moment for that. It seems to me is to use this as leverage to make these players not as big. All right. So apparently Jim Jordan has been is going to be awarded the Medal of Freedom by Donald Trump. And if you are a wrestling coach out there who has had your students come to you and tell you that they are being assaulted and molested by a team doctor and you ignore it, I don't want you to expect that you're necessarily going to get the Medal of Freedom too. Just because that's working for Jim Jordan does not mean it's going to work for you. So the best thing to do is alert the authorities. Yes, it worked for Jim Jordan. Okay. And there was a lot of really, really, a lot of destruction of people's lives that were a function of Jim Jordan keeping that secret. But that doesn't mean that you're going to get the Medal of Honor. So don't do it. In other news about the Medal of Honor, isn't this the right wing that's very concerned about pedophiles in the government or pedophile enablers? Yes. Jim Jordan was not in the government at the time. Okay. That makes sense. Okay. He was a coach of a wrestling team. Not to be confused with Denny Hastert. Okay. Not to be confused with Denny Hastert, who was, of course, Speaker of the House for the Republicans. And when he was a wrestling coach, he was engaged in actually attempting to assault some of his students.
That's a weird pattern, by the way.
So I'm sure it's just a coincidence. But that said, I'll leave that as a distinct thing here. This is difficult for me. Because when I was young, I would watch the Patriots play, and it was a very bad time. It was a very tough time for the Celtics when I was watching at this in this era. Celtics were like the worst team in the league, and like Dave Cowens was like a player coach, and it was rough, and it was pre-Bird, and I think they'd just gotten Parrish, and it was maybe
right. They were all white guys before they got the good white guy.
Parrish was on the team, and Tiny Archibald was on the team. Maybe Cedric Maxwell came in around that time, but they were whiter than most. It was also a horrible time for the Patriots too. And then things got good under Belichick, and they brought in Bledsoe, and then they upgraded from Bledsoe and now this. And here is, fortunately, I got something to root for in this. Jim McGovern, congressman from Worcester County area, on with John Berman on CNN, basically telling Bill Belichick, do the right thing. Do not accept the Medal of Freedom from Donald Trump, even though he wants to give it to you.
If I can, I want to ask you about a matter of parochial interest, but that is not to suggest it's unimportant or not symbolic. New England Patriots coach Bill Belichick, we understand, will be presented with the Presidential Medal of Freedom later this week. What do you think? What message does it send if Bill Belichick goes to the White House to receive that after this insurrection at the Capitol?
Yeah, I would refuse it if I were Bill Belichick. And this president has made a mockery of the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Look at who he is giving it to in the last weeks, people like Devin Nunes and Jim Jordan. I mean, please, Bill Belichick should do the right thing and say, no thanks.
What would it tell you if he does show up?
I'll be very disappointed, to be honest with you. I think it's look at this president is not fit to be in office. So anything that he would bestow on anybody, to me, is meaningless, and to accept it is disgraceful.
But Bill has been supportive of Trump in the past, so he's going to accept it. Like, so was Brady. MAGA hat in the locker. Belichick's greatest coach of all time.
Look, you walk into Bill Belichick's house, all right, and this is the way it would go. Super Bowl, Super Bowl, Super Bowl, Super Bowl. Whoa, Medal of Freedom? Where'd you get that? Donald Trump. Ooh, dude. Yeah, no, I don't think so. I say no.
And it's so weird because, Belichick, right? His whole thing is do your job. His whole thing's about accountability for his players. He wants smart players. He wants people who know his complex system. He's supposedly in his little realm not supposedly, he's the greatest coach of all time. Fundamentally sound guy. You're supposed to be accountable to other people. You're not supposed to lie, call attention to yourself. That's the whole Patriot mantra. And the guy he supports is the exact opposite of everything. All right, well,
let's just wait. Let's just wait, and hopefully he will reject it.
I highly doubt it. I mean, Nick Saban got it from... Did Nick Saban get the presidential... Or, I don't know.
It was Rush Limbaugh.
Rush Limbaugh. But, there is a weird culture in football that is...
Dude better not accept it, or it's just going to be Worcester Red Sox for me, 24/7. I'm gonna completely cut out the Patriots.
Really?
No.
Yeah. Why would you? Yeah. Come on.
I can't.
I'm sure he's very concerned about that.
Mila and I, when it came out that Trump and Brady supported Trump, we both took our hats and put black duct tape over the Patriots seal.
Oh, Brady's also an asshole, but that's, yeah. And neither here nor there. Belichick's the evil genius asshole, so he can get away with it. You know who made the other. We know who made the other.
So difficult.
It's nice because I get to have the false confidence of supporting a team like the Maras or Democratic donors, as if that's that great. But I also am a Knicks and Rangers fan, and Jim Dolan is the owner. Not shocking that little piece of shit likes Trump. So
there you go.
Shook his hand once.
You did?
Very clammy. Yep.
You know who else has a terrible handshake? Jared Kushner.
Did you shake his hand once?
Yeah, I used to write for the New York Observer, and he was the boss of it. And he was at the Christmas party, and he had a real dead fish handshake.
That is absolutely not surprising.
That doesn't shock me at all. He seems like a very weak man physically. Not to be mean, but who cares?
Calling from a 509 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? Did that work? Calling from a 509 area code. Why is my thing frozen? Bear with us, ladies and gentlemen. Little technical issues.
Everyone turned off the stream because I talked about sports for too long.
The entire system broke down.
Also, I just want to say, as someone who is also physically weak and sickly, that's no excuse for a bad handshake.
Right. You got to put some effort into it.
Good point. Yeah.
I think we lost that caller. Let's go next down on the list. Calling from a 573 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam. This is Tom from Missouri.
Tom from Missouri, what's on your mind?
Oh, so much, man, so much. But I want to recall a conversation you had with David Feldman quite some time ago, because I also dabble in the arts that is stand-up. And what COVID has shown me is that I could do so much better than that right now. And I remember you're bringing up like your frustration with doing stand-up during the Bush years. And initially I was a little bit hesitant with getting on board, but the more I keep seeing takes from comedians on political issues, the more I realize you were entirely right about the culture of it. So mainly just want to vent my frustrations on how comedians can never really be trusted for a nuanced take, and that they just get, I guess the term would be simped or stand way too much by a already pretty toxic following. So,
all right, so let me just explain what you're talking about. Oh, we should say that tomorrow night, I think that that video with Feldman and Kindler and I and Matt is gonna be released, and it's got great clips of Michael being really, really funny. And was that where I talked about it with Feldman, or was it a different?
It was right around when Michael passed, and
I think it was a different.
Yeah, it was around that time. I think it might have been after. I'm pretty sure it was after that. But yeah,
stand up is not necessarily the best vehicle to talk about politics. Occasionally you can do it, but the jokes require a certain, they can't be as surgical as you want them to be if you're really trying to make a political point, it seems to me.
Well,
it's pretty broad.
Did John, I'm actually honestly asking this because I still have such fond regard for Jon Stewart and think he did it as best as anybody can. Is there no?
Oh, I don't agree with that.
Okay, well then, but that's it could be rose-colored glasses, is what I'm saying.
Yeah,
I'm genuinely asking.
My main thing is that there's a huge amount of what I would call enlightened centrism that kind of runs rampant through comics, because to them, what they view as maybe left-wing activism and right-wing activism, they're equivocators. They think they're arguably the same. So the thing that would frustrate me when doing comedy is seeing someone go up on stage and be like, well, you have people who do this on the left and people who do that on the right. They're all equally the same. I'm the voice of reason. I'm like, you're a fucking pussy.
Well, don't you think that has something to do with the fact that in order to succeed in comedy, most of the people who do have rich parents?
Yeah, I would 100%. Yeah, I would 100% get behind that. Anytime I've ever tried to do material that try and skirt the both sides, it's well, I'm here to criticize the Democrats because they're not, a bunch of commies like I would like them to be. Whereas when I see someone go up and do something well, you can't. On one hand, you got people that support Nazis and Nazis and bridges, and the other is saying the bridges are racist. These are entirely the same people.
And it's often
well, hold on. Well, let me just push back. I mean, I think there's a lot of people who enter into comedy because they can afford to, but there's also a lot of people who I mean, I knew who would enter into comedy because they didn't really have many other options. I mean, and so I'm not convinced that's what that is. I mean, a lot of there's also a big, there is a big cohort of comedians who are more likely coming from, sort of a blue collar background, and who are, reactionary, particularly. I mean, I'm thinking my generation, but people are just responding to 9/11 and stuff like that. I mean, it's the case with Jon Stewart. I think that is the case to a certain extent, but he even that show, The Daily Show, started as really more a critique of media and than it was a political show.
Also, like a big theme of that show ended up being like, how can I become friends with John McCain? Or like, how can we like be,
Yeah, the rally to restore sanity. That was the weakest shit ever.
And that was late. I mean,
Yeah.
the John
Late
McCain
stage stuff.
hagiography happened in the early aughts.
All right.
And
I just remember it being the only place where I, like, at the time was getting actual critique of the war.
that is also true. And I mean, it is a perfect example of how unbelievably absent dissent was at that time, that Jon Stewart could arise in that way. And that is why. I mean, that, like, when I try to communicate to all of you guys, like, how far the landscape has moved, it is why Jon Stewart was so popular, because things were that bad. And I mean, really,
I remember
Colbert's stuff was significantly more political than Stewart's, and that was because he was doing a character. So he had more room to do satire than to actually like sort of provide, like he as a character didn't need the credibility. He was just basically mocking, a certain political perspective. But it's tough, like stand up, you need to come up there and you're basically, you need to be presumably a neutral arbiter, and you're just calling it as you see it. You're supposed to be a person as opposed to like a character. And so it is limiting. But yeah, I mean, like, you want to look at what the blue collar comedians do. Most of them are going to be right wing.
But there isn't a lot of that. I mean, you're more of an expert on this than me, obviously, but a lot more. But like but what I'm seeing, I'm hearing myself echo, by the way.
Yeah, that's weird. I'm going to let you go, caller, but I appreciate the call.
But I mean, I think what
Thanks.
people are
Left
hitting.
is best, guys.
Thanks. I think a lot of what people are hitting on is the Trump era comedy on like TV with whatever Samantha Bee and now Trevor Noah. It's so surface level and like socially based, and there's no structural critique, and it's like become very corporatized after the Daily Show was so successful that you just like don't see actual critique about the Trump administration in a way that isn't just like as safe as possible.
I mean, if you look at some of Trevor Noah's old stand-up where he makes fun of workers protesting for their rights in South Africa, it's not that surprising that he doesn't have the most structural radical critique.
I mean, but Stewart's was just as bad in that respect too. I mean, I think, and
yeah, people like to act like Trevor Noah is so much worse than Jon Stewart in his politics. I'm like, no, you just grew up and you're harder to impress now, and you're smarter than you used to be.
Stewart was also sort of funnier. I mean, I think Jon Stewart is just sort of funnier than Trevor Noah.
I'm talking about the politics, I guess.
Oh yeah.
Like I used to watch The Daily Show when I was in high school, and then I had a moment where I'm like, oh wait, these politics are crap.
Yeah,
but it served a purpose at the time.
But I was also like very young, and so maybe it's just I'm genuinely asking if it's rose-colored glasses, and you guys seem to have answered that for me. It's gonna take.
It is. You should go back and revisit some of those shows.
It's gonna take me a little minute to get used to.
It just was very unique in that moment, but the politics were not great. All right, folks, that's it for calls today. Apologies, I know. What's next, Sam? Going after George Carlin? George Carlin, I was not. I mean, I like George Carlin. I was more of like a Lenny Bruce, like Bill Hicks to a certain extent. But Lenny Bruce was for me. I was much more interested in Lenny Bruce than I was in Carl.
Also, comedy just doesn't age that well. There's big passages in the book that I'm reading right now, Underworld by Don DeLillo, that are just Lenny Bruce like raps from, during the Cuban Missile Crisis. And I read it, I'm like, this guy just sounds like a hipster from the 60s. Like, I don't want to read this anymore. Like, it's insightful, but like, Jesus.
I like George Carlin. He had some very good bits where very radical rants, actually, basically against capitalism and against the system. And I was arguing with Jake Flores about this, who is another very funny leftist comedian who I like his show a lot. But he's like, well, but Jamie, were those bits really funny? And I'm like, well, not really.
I mean, that it's very hard to be funny and to actually make a sort of like insightful point. And that's why a lot of these comedians ultimately like end up not being funny anymore. I agree. Comedy just does not age well. The only thing I've seen that I think is funny, like 20 years after the fact is Who's the Caboose. It's the only thing I find. Dutch, let's see. Dutch teacher, wouldn't it have been strategically advantaged if the terrorists had gotten hold, for example, of Feinstein and Collins and executed them? I don't follow what you're saying there, but
No, it would not have been strategic.
And it would not have been good either.
No, I'm not. Yeah, I don't quite get what. James in Jersey City. I work at a Fortune financial company that rhymes with American Express. This morning, our CEO sent out an apology for supporting 22 of the insurgents in the past and pledged the company PAC will never support any of the senators or House members who contested Biden's electoral votes again. Well, that's not bad. But I would like to have them not spend any money on our politics. Melissa from Chicago. Good news from my state. Michael Madigan will not be running again for Speaker of the House in Illinois. Eric from Iowa, can we talk about Stripe, MasterCard, Visa banning people being extra problematic? I'd much rather a more democratic or legal process to take place before banning them from the largest ways for them to make a living. It's not like these companies care or just have some more reason. They're just trying to save face. One day they come for some MAGA chud, the next day they come for a leftist. I agree. I mean, I again, like, we need more, I think that's really problematic, particularly as you digitize the economy more. And I guess theoretically, that's what, cryptocurrency is about. But yeah, I do think that's a problem. Bottom structure. Was curious, after all, you mentioned the Colorado representative, but she has lost around 35,000 followers on her Twitter account since the Capitol riot. And those would be accounts that were purged by Twitter for their Q involvement. Interesting. Zig, do we need to make social media a public place where companies need to get a permit to enter the space so they are subject to specific online regulations? Treat it like the public square. I'm not sure I fully follow. Carl from the Geest, boo-hoo, Parler can't eat their cake and have it too. They'll set up their own cloud, which is difficult but not impossible. Indeed, these were the same people who got rid of net neutrality in Section 230, both of which would have protected them or wanted to get rid of Section 230. Cedar bra salesman, it's completely unrelated point, but can you please have Hassan Piker on a casual Friday one of these days? Would be a good time. Yeah, we should. God bless you. The other Biden being told by AWE, that's the Amazon software, they have 24 hours to move your software really is quite killing to a company. That being said, not doing everything you can to appease AWS after your platform was used to launch a coup on the country, perhaps you need to make amends. All right, I'm not sure.
Well, I mean, look, the fact that there are giant social media conglomerate gatekeepers that control the revenue streams for small companies is not anything that's foreign to people like us, right? Because we're on YouTube or, we're getting our revenue through other bigger companies. I don't think it is a good precedent to be at the whims of them. I don't know.
Krauser, I think it's important any antitrust process Twitter or Facebook affects back-end, not public-facing aspects of Facebook where I can't communicate with out-of-state, out-of-country family or just dies. No, you'd be able to do that. But yes, of course. I mean, when we talk about breaking these companies up, what we're talking about is dividing divisions that sell advertising or regulating how much data you can take, even if people opt into it. I mean, that's why, it may not be as the utility of some of the social media may not be as good if like we eliminate certain algorithms, but I just think that it would all be that type of back end. The functionality would change a little bit, but not that basic. All right, 5 more of these. Doodles. Ted Cruz was Google's ant monopoly defense attorney. Their opposition to monopoly is exclusively self-serving. Rube Davin. Hey, Sam, if you recall, Kamala's main moment from the primary was calling on Twitter to ban Trump Twilight Zone music. Kid tested, Politburo approved. I just want to see Belichick with the cutoff suit he'll wear to the ceremony. Emma's right. There's really a disturbing culture in football in terms of violence and ignorance. 10 lawn gnomes. How about them Browns? I think profit from monetization of people's data should be taxed and used to fund a UBI. Crass rebuttal. I have an idea and turned off my social media, so I'm passing it on to you. On January 20th, we need to put 10 million progressives in D.C. with Bernie hats. Yeah, maybe. I don't think there's going to be a big celebration on the inauguration, but we'll see. Alexis 485 savings and loan scandal. Another thing we overlooked. Indeed, John McCain was still a national hero. He's a big part of that. Glad Brian Kilmeade is on board for nationalization. 3 more. Luke Maddock. Thank you, MR crew, for keeping me sane. Really glad to have Em on the team now. Also, could I get a shofar for my birthday today? Rustin Power Brooks. Country Mouse, Vermont State Police has been circulating a notification. There has been a call for right-wingers to gather in the state's capital on the 17th, and there's an expectation of violence on the 20th in Washington. Yeah, I don't think we're out of the woods in terms of that yet. And the final I am of the day. Emma's bookie. I told you not to bet on the Steelers.
I didn't.
Matt, Brendan, Emma, Jamie, good job today. See you guys tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar, but finding out won't make me feel any better.